Good morning, I'm Julian Reed, and welcome to Today in Parliament.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janae Noel Ferguson. Welcome to another broadcast. Now, Today in Parliament focuses on present legislation, and we take a look back at past debates.
Well, Janae, we had a short break as some major events took place here in the capital. We had the IAAF World Relays that brought hundreds of athletes and supporters to our shores. And then the first Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival. It
was definitely a busy time, but a good time had by all overall. We also had some developments coming out of those events as the IAAF is expected to return to New Providence in 2017. That's following the Olympics last year. And various countries from around the world, Julian, they now want to participate in Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival, but now it's back to business.
Yes, it is. Well, when the House last met, parliamentarians debated and passed the Evidence Amendment Bill and the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill 2014. They include some minor amendments to the current legislation.
Now, those amendments allowed for experts to give evidence by way of a live television link on criminal proceedings. That's under the Act, and under the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill, the government sought to amend the law, removing the 5-year restriction that currently exists regarding the appointment of law reform commissioners.
All right. Now, during the previous sitting of the House, Fort Charlotte MP Dr. Andre Rollins moved for a select committee to investigate matters concerning that oil leak from a service station in the Marathon area and the impact on residents living there. Well, the Fort Charlotte MP and the Bamboo Town MP, Renwood Wells, were the only two from the governing party who supported that motion, along with members of the official opposition. All other members who were present that day voted no, but several members were absent.
That they were. It was announced earlier this week that the Attorney General, Senator the Honorable Allison Maynard Gibson, has called for an investigation as to why that report conducted by consultants Black & Veatch was delayed in being released to the public. Now, this after the government had apologized for that delay. There was certainly a lot of issues coming out of that session of the House. House Speaker Dr. Kendall Major also telling House members that he's yet to make a decision into that matter involving the Public Accounts Committee and the Urban Renewal Commission. That following an audit report conducted of its operations. Now, the co-chairs have refused to appear before the committee, stating that the proper policies were not followed. It's expected that the House Speaker will probably speak to that matter today as well.
Yes, some major issues expected to be dealt with, Janae, but today, debate is expected to begin on the Petroleum Bill 2014 and the Sovereign Wealth Fund 2014 bill. Both bills are intended to reform and modernize the petroleum exploration regime in the country.
That's right. When this matter first came about 3 years ago, there was strong opposition, especially from environmentalists who questioned the impact oil drilling would have on one of our most fundamental resources, that's our marine life. Now, it would be interesting to see what protections are in place with this legislation. And at one point, it was also said that before any drilling took place, that the matter would be taken to a referendum. Now, for the Bahamian people to decide whether or not we would continue to drill. Now, we did have an opportunity to speak with Simon Porter. He's the CEO of Bahamas Petroleum Company that has been granted a license by the government to establish a well for exploration. He, along with the company's legal counsel, Jo Beth Colby, explained how the company plans to move ahead in their search for oil in Bahamian waters. Let's take a look.
Yeah, the minister made very clear in 2013 that there would be no need for a referendum. His words, as I recall them, were, let's go and find out if we've got something there. And then we can place all of the information as a company before the government. So he was very clear on that there's no need for a referendum for us to go and explore.
I'm really excited for the regulations being put in place because that's really what we're going to be guided by. And it's something that, as Simon has said, we've always been aware of because it's from the global international industry where we have to be guided by these particular regulations and best practices, but the Bahamas didn't have it in place. And that's always been a concern, me being a Bahamian, whereas I'm in the company and I can see that we're constructing our plans and our information and all of our processes by global standards, but the fact that we didn't have it in our legislation, any other company could have came in and done whatever they wanted to and had nothing to be held by. And so I think it's very important for the Bahamas that these regulations are put in place, so when this industry does open up and other investors come in, they can be guided by and they can have a structure and a format, and the government can hold them accountable to anything that goes away from what the regulations instruct them to.
Yeah, well, during the discussions on the legislation about to be debated today, Porter also explained the importance of the bill that will replace and repeal the old act that's been in existence since the 1970s.
That's right. Let's take a listen.
The existing package of regulations for governing petroleum operations date back to the 70s, and of course the attitude of society and technology have moved on. So in December this year, the government tabled a new raft of legislation to govern a number of aspects of petroleum operations here in the Bahamas. There are two bills. The first bill, the Petroleum Bill, acts as a framework to the operations, and then a sovereign wealth bill that in the event of success will look to govern how the wealth that might be gained from successful exploration is distributed and the wealth preserved over time for generations to come. I guess the focus for us as an industry, the petroleum exploration industry, is really that first bill, the Petroleum Bill. Underneath that sits three sets of regulations. The petroleum regulations, which really sets the sort of standards and framework by which the industry will operate. Then there's a second and third set of regulations. The third governs health and safety, the standards to which we will operate, the international best practices to which we must adhere to. And then the same with a third piece of regulation, which is the environmental protection regulation. Now, these were put before, as I said, Parliament in December, so we know what they say, and there's nothing that really impacts us adversely, in the sense that all of the work that we've done to date here in the Bahamas as Bahamas Petroleum has really been against what we see as international best practice and indeed the global best standards that we can find for our kind of operation. Well, to date we've spent nearly $100 million, and exploration is a sort of an investigative process whereby we always think that there's oil in commercial quantities where we go and explore, and what we do is we do geology, we do engineering assessments, we do environmental impact studies to see the extent to which it may be possible to produce commercial oil here in the Bahamas. The major part of that work is around geology and what we call the seismic survey. So that allows us to interrogate the rocks beneath the sea in the Bahamas to look for structures that may or may not contain oil. Having completed all of that work, the next step is to attract investment here into the industry in the Bahamas so that we can drill an oil well. The focus of our activities are about 25 miles off the northern Cuba shore. So from where we sit today here in Nassau, we're some 270 miles away. It's 80 miles from the nearest inhabited island, which is Andros, and indeed some 100 miles from Key Sal.
Now, Jolene, it's also understood that if passed, this revolutionary piece of legislation will allow the government to partner directly with any oil explorer and provide for funds to be derived from oil, gas, and natural resources. That's to be deposited into the Sovereign Wealth Fund and to be used for the benefit of the country's economy and to its citizens. In this next clip, Colby spoke about and emphasized the long and short-term benefits of oil exploration in the Bahamas and the possibility of us discovering oil on a commercial level.
There'll be diversification. You'd also have short term with new tourists, because we always speak about tourism and bringing persons into the country. Well, on the rigs, you have a vast amount of various persons from different backgrounds who are coming in to assist with the project and the exploration, some of which have never been here to the Bahamas. And of course, knowing that they're coming here or working here, they'd probably invite some of their families and spend time on the islands that are closest by to the project, which is South Andros and also Free Freeport. And so you'd have a different form of tourism going on in the Bahamas when this industry opens up, as well as benefiting the islands because, of course, hanging out there and spending time there, they will be spending money to restaurants, bars, spending time in the hotels, and then as it relates to the actual exploration project assisting the islands. Freeport, we have the port there, and we'd be looking to use that as a laydown facility for our pipes and any work that we need to get done. We can have it done right in Freeport. We can hire in plumbers, electricians on the rig. We can also hire support vessels for waste and food back and forth from the rig. We'll be hiring some persons to take the crews back and forth. So helicopters will be seeing some jobs stretched across from our industry. And then some of the long-term effects that you can see in the event of success, you'd have the industry, obviously. You'd have more and more investors coming in from the global side of the industry, and the funds that will be transferred into the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Obviously, we don't have anything to do with what the government does with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, but as a Bahamian, you would expect that some of the funds are used for infrastructure. We're always talking about the road project and how it's cost us so much money. We have a deficit that the government would probably be able to pay off in about 5 or 6 years or less, and also schools, science. We can build more and more persons that will work in the industry from the Bahamas and diversify our professionalism, our career background. And so there are a vast amount of benefits that you'll see in the industry. And so I think it's very important for the Bahamas that these regulations are put in place. So when this industry does open up and other investors come in, they can be guided by, and they can have a structure and a format, and the government can hold them accountable to anything that goes away from what the regulations instruct them to do.
As we take out exploration licenses, we have to pay fees. So we have to pay an annual fee to the government in order to explore. And so this, over time, over the period of the license so far, and going forward, will add up to multiple millions of dollars just to have the right to explore. Once we bring the rig in, this is just a rule of thumb that I work to, but between 5 and 10% of that $100 million is usually spent locally. So that's, as Jo Beth has said, it's with local commerce, it's providing support to the rig, contracts for logistics, for waste management, for water, for food, those kinds of things. And again, as Jo Beth said, much of that will accrue to the nearby islands of Andros and indeed the support services that we could get from Grand Bahama. Over and above that, back here and around the various islands, obviously education. We're a science-based, technology-based industry, and so we look to support science education in schools, mathematics, because that's good for all seasons. To the extent that we do have success in the future, then we need children to develop those kinds of thirsts. Last week I took a group of children to one of the cut-throughs, a big limestone section, and then hopefully enthuse them about geology. It's not everybody's cup of tea, rocks, but hopefully they saw some fossils and they saw some rocks. So education is a huge issue. And then hopefully they were going into training. In the event of success, they could operate within our industry. And then, of course, in the event of success, we pay to the government directly royalties. And those royalties on the kind of success that we're hoping to get, again, we're not planning on that success yet, but the government's putting in place these regulations and indeed the bill to cover a sovereign wealth fund whereby they could look to manage and distribute that wealth.
Well, thanks so much for listening to us this morning. We now take you to live proceedings of the House of Assembly. You can tune in again at 1 p.m. for live interviews. I'm Janine Noel Ferguson, joined by Julian Reed. Continue to watch live proceedings of the House of Assembly.
$1 billion, you can see that very quickly then that deficit
and he is to state his case and listen to the presiding officer, who happens to be the high priest. I read to you from the Acts of the Apostles this morning, the encounter in the Sanhedrin. The next day, Paul was asked to appear, and appear he did. And looking earnestly at the council, said, "Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day." The high priest took exception to this remark, and Ananias commanded that those who stood next to Paul strike him on his mouth. They didn't know Paul. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewash wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law?" And those who stood by said, "Do you revile God's high priest?" Then Paul said, "I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people." A lesson for all of us, that due respect and authority should be given to those who lead. And may God give you the grace to conform today. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, how grateful we are that our lives are spared to see this beautiful Wednesday morning. Thank you for the heavenly sunshine that floods this land. And thank you for the showers of rain that fell days ago. Increase our faith, dear Lord, and increase our capacity to love you more and to love each other better. Forgive us where we have come short, and increase our capacity to improve in every way. We thank you for the leaders of this nation at this time, and we ask for your blessing upon them, every one. Bless the Speaker of this honorable House today as he directs the agenda, and give us the courage to represent you in such a way that we will bring honor and glory to your holy name. We pray through Jesus Christ our Lord, who taught us to pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
O. Wilsham, F. Mitchell, A. Grace, Hannah Martin, Griffin, Gibson, Fitzgerald, Dr. Darvel, Dr. Gomez, Dorset, Dr. Johnson, Halkitis, Strawn, C. Gomez, Roll, Dr. Minnis, Smith, Hamilton, Wells, Moore, Grant, Butler Turner, E.T., L. Miller, P. Turnquest, R. Pinder, Dr. Rollins, R. Lythorn, T. Forbes, A. Forbes, H. Shipman, G. Moore, T. Neely, R. Curry.
Good morning, honorable members. Today is Wednesday, the 13th day of May, in the year of our Lord 2015. We wanted to welcome each and every one of you back to a new sitting of this honorable house. I trust that everybody's had a wonderful experience over the last 2 weeks. And one certainly was the celebration of Mother's Day. Always want to take an opportunity to wish my dear mother happy belated Mother's Day once again. We are delighted to have a number of persons visiting with us in the gallery this morning before we begin in earnest our proceedings. And I am advised that the Nursing Association is here the Nurses Association of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, celebrating the month of May as National Nurses Month. We ought to celebrate you National Nurses Year for the work that you have been doing consistently and tirelessly throughout our archipelago. Nurses, a force for change, care effective and cost effective. Cost effective is very important now, particularly there's some impending words that we know is happening very soon. So we depend on nurses in all that we do in terms of our health care. Visiting with us is the Nurses Association President, Mrs. Paula Cash, Mrs. Willa Mae Stewart, First Vice President, Mrs. Dorothy Taylor, Deputy Principal Nursing Officer at Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, Lisa Rowell, Secretary, Nurses Association, Ms. Dorothy Francis, Registered Nurse at PMH, and Mrs. Glendina Minus, Nursing Officer, Department of Public Health, along with Garnell Ritchie, Assistant Vice President of Patient Care at Doctors Hospital. We are delighted that you have taken the time to visit with us this morning. We trust that your experience here will be a memorable one, and I would certainly love if my colleagues and this honorable house give them a rousing applause. Secondly, we also have visiting with us a team invited by the Minister of Education and the member for Marathon, a team from Anatole Rogers High School. And I see many of them are weighed down with goals around their necks. So you're celebrating obviously something today. And I wouldn't give the secret this morning, but I'll await the communication by the minister in due course, who will formally introduce you and welcome you. But this house can begin by welcoming the students at Anatole Rogers. Now, just prior to beginning our proceedings in earnest, I thought it fitting at this time to deal with a matter that has been pending for some time in this honorable, as it relates to the Parliament and this honorable House. And in the form of a communication and a ruling, I'd begin by saying that on the 15th of April, an issue arose in this House with respect to the functions and exercise of powers of the Public Accounts Committee to send for persons, papers, and records, which powers were being deployed in aid of an examination into an audited report which had been prepared by the Auditor General in respect to the accounts of the Urban Renewal Commission. The attempt to use these powers in respect to that inquiry has sparked much debate within and outside the walls of Parliament, and the ensuing commentary has called into question not only the use of the powers of the committee, but the various and propriety of the exercise of those powers, having regard to the circumstances in which the report came to be made and the fact that it had not been tabled in this honorable House. Because of the uncertainty surrounding the legal and other issues which have arisen, I took the position that any consideration of the matter by this House should be postponed until the chair had an opportunity to examine the issues very carefully, aided by the advice of the clerks and any examples that could be found in Erskine May's leading text on parliamentary practice, as well as relevant practice and procedures of this House or similar parliaments in the Commonwealth. I also took the course of seeking the advice of the law officers of the Crown, acting in their constitutional capacity to advise this House as I am authorized to do pursuant to Rule 7A, subsection 6 of the House of Assembly rules in accordance with precedent and practice. In my request for advice, I posed two specific questions. Let me begin by quoting the summary of the advice which has been given well, I'll begin by stating the question. Is the Public Accounts Committee confined to examining only those documents which have been audited, tabled, and referred to it? And secondly, does the Public Accounts Committee have the authority to send for persons, papers, and documents? Let me begin by quoting from the summary of advice which has been given in respect to the questions posed. That proceeds as follows. For the reasons given below, the questions to the answers have been submitted. Question 1. The answer to the question whether the Public Accounts Committee is confined to examining only those documents which have been audited, tabled, or referred to it, the answer is yes, although this is not construed conjunctively. What is clear is that the Public Accounts Committee may only examine and report on documents which are before the House. The role and function of the Public Accounts Committee, like any other standing or select committee of the House, is confined to the terms of reference which the House has given it, and a select committee which purports to act outside of the delimited area would be acting ultra vires. The function of the Public Accounts Committee and the category of documents which it may examine or report on are set out in Rule 17, subsection 1, Rules of the House of Assembly, and relate to reports or financial statements which have been properly laid before the House pursuant to constitutional or statutory requirements or procedural rules of the House. As the audit report pursuant to which the PAC is reported to exercise powers to send for persons, papers, and records has in fact not been tabled or laid before the House, the PAC cannot take cognizance of it, nor exercise any of its investigative powers in respect of it, without a specific reference from the House by way of resolution. Answer to the question 2, whether the Public Accounts Committee has the authority to send for persons and documents. The answer also is yes, although this is also subject to certain qualifications. For example, the Public Accounts Committee's ability to send for persons, papers, and records may only be exercised in the performance of its function delegated by the House and subject to any parliamentary or statutory limitations that may apply. As to the manner and form of the exercise of the powers, the PPR, powers, papers, and records powers, the needs for its formal exercise is normally obviated by the usual willingness of prospective witnesses to cooperate based on invitations to appear and produce documents. However, if the occasion arises for the issuance of a formal summons to exercise PPR powers, the statutory requirements laid out in Section 14(1) of the Powers and Privileges, Senate and House of Assembly, statute law, have to be observed. This requires a resolution of the chamber, in this case the House of Assembly, which created the committee which is embarking on the exercise of powers, papers, and records powers. After my careful study of the issues, aided by various legal opinions, and particularly of late the offices of the Crown and other scholarship, the following position has emerged, which I will state in the form of propositions. 1. The power to send for persons, papers, and records, often abbreviated PPR powers, resides in each chamber of the Parliament, and it is a valuable tool to aid in efficient and democratic parliamentary government. This power, too, this power can clearly be delegated to a select committee by the chamber that created the committee, and in the case of the Public Accounts Committee, the said PPR powers were granted pursuant to Rule 17 of the 2005 House of Assembly Rules of Procedures. 3. The PPR powers are given for the express purpose of enabling a select committee to carry out the functions which have been delegated to it by this Honorable House, and based on the comment from the first report of the UK Select Committee on Privilege, to utilize those powers outside the delegated remit would involve the committee acting ultra vires. 4. that in practice, the exercise of the powers, papers, records powers is almost universally done by a simple letter of invitation only, which are normally voluntarily complied with, but that no sanction might attach if such invocations are declined. 5, that if a formal summons has to be issued, it has to be done pursuant to a resolution of the entire House, which alone can punish for contempt in respect to matters into which the House has directed an inquiry on which is properly within the delegated remit of the Select Committee. This much is clear on the proper construction of Section 14.1, which governs our procedure. And 6, the said audit report pursuant to which the PAC is purported to carry out its investigatory function has not been laid before this House and is therefore not a category of documents, audited or unaudited, that can be said to be, quote, before the House, close quote, so that to attract the scrutiny of the Public Accounts Committee. In light of these observations, which clearly have support in the law and practice relating to the performance of parliamentary functions, there are several possible courses of actions that this House may take to resolve the matter in a reasoned and procedurally proper manner. The first would be to refer the matter of consideration to the Committee of Privilege, pursuant to Rule 14, which has the delegated authority for inquiring into all matters affecting the powers of the House and members thereof, and all matters relating to the practice and procedure of the House and its committee. However, armed with this opinion and my research and guided by what I've learned through Erskine Mays, I would be of the opinion that this course of action would be somewhat futile. As to the second course of action, it is clearly up to this Honorable House to decide by way of resolution on a motion brought for the purpose whether it wishes to cause the said report to be tabled in this Honorable House and referred to the Public Accounts Committee, in which the PPR powers may be properly invoked, either informally or by formal summons issued pursuant to a resolution of the House if necessary. In the meantime, I would direct, and I have directed, the Public Accounts Committee to stay its hand in relation to further inquiries related to the said report until this Honorable House decides how it intends to proceed along the lines outlined above. End of statement. Now, I would also just like to state for the record that we recognize that a report is in the public domain, and in and of itself, it has not been invalidated. And so I would urge the relevant parties, and particularly the relevant ministers who have responsibility for reports being audited and received by the Auditor General, to in due course and without delay provide them to this Honorable House for laying of the table, so that the Public Accounts Committee can be empowered to do its work. This is a committee that is bipartisan and forms the basis of an important administrative structure in our Parliament, and it is my prayer that an atmosphere of comedy prevails in dealing with these matters. Thank you very much. Now to the business at hand. Introduction and swearing of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstyle.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to beg leave to table on the House a copy of the following. The Immigration Fees Amendment Regulations 2015.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to leave to lay on the table the Immigration General Amendment Regulations 2015.
Order that the document be brought up. In order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Speaker, I beg leave today. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs Consular Services Fees Regulations 2015.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up and order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Speaker, I beg leave today on the table of the House a copy of the Immigration Amendment Act number 9 of 2015, Immigration Amendment Act 2015, approved day notice.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up
Thank you, Mr.
and order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. None. There are none. Statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two communications this morning, Mr. Speaker, and I know the Prime Minister has a communication as well. I will make the first communication and then make the other one after. The first communication I'm making is in relation to the students of Anatole Rogers. Some of them have to leave to go and sit national examinations, so I appreciate the fact that I will be able to address them and allow them to go and sit their exams afterwards. I want to thank the Honourable Member for Centerville for this. Mr. Speaker, it is with great pride that I stand here this morning as the Minister of Education, Science and Technology to bring your attention to a few of the great things that are happening in the Ministry of Education. First, I wish to acknowledge this morning a group of students from Anatole Rogers Senior High School. The following students, Ms. Desiree Dean, Ms. Amara Poitier, Mr. Vinaj Poitier, and Ms. Jeanne Farris, coached by Mrs. Janelle Cambridge Johnson, were the first international team to win the American Hotel and Lodging Educational Institute International Hospitality and Tourism Management Competition in Orlando, Florida recently. Mr. Speaker, the news gets better. Each of the 4 students has received a scholarship valued at $57,000 to top universities in the United States of America. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, all of these students will attend an all-expense-paid trip to New York to attend a conference later this summer. Mr. Speaker, this marks the 5th year that the students from Anatole Rogers have participated in this competition. Each year, however, they were determined to improve on the performance of the previous year. The first year, the team placed 5th overall. The second year, 7th overall. The third year, 5th again. And last year, they secured a 4th place finish, Mr. Speaker. But this year, Mr. Speaker, they walked away as the champions. Mr. Speaker, just to give you an indication of how big this accomplishment is, the Anatole Rogers School is the first school outside of the United States of America to win this award and competition, the first. Among the competitors were high schools from Florida, schools from California, from Guam, Idaho, New Hampshire, Texas, Washington, D.C., and Wyoming. There was also another Bahamian school in the competition, Mr. Speaker, and that was the school from Jack Haywood in Freeport, Grand Bahama. I want to give them a round of applause as well. Mr. Speaker, during the competition, teams of students had to display their proficiency while competing in 3 main areas. The first one being hotel operations. Students had to apply their knowledge in a 3-part challenge. Room inspection, in which students have 10 minutes to find 10 housekeeping errors in a typical guest room using executive housekeeping checklists night audit, in which team performed financial calculations and manually post front desk accounting information and case studies in food and beverage, guest service, and sales and marketing, in which students are given 20 minutes to prepare solutions in a case study scenarios. The hospitality project is the second part of it. Teams demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities in event planning. They are given a scenario that includes budget parameters, proposal design, banquet event order, menu, and floor plans, Mr. Speaker. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the Knowledge Bowl. Teams demonstrate their knowledge through a multi-round question and answer quiz, Mr. Speaker. So as you can see, Mr. Speaker, this is indeed a very difficult contest in which students have to be very well prepared, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Janelle Cambridge Johnson, who has been out of the classroom for approximately 1 year and who now works at Bahama as a training specialist, introduced this competition to the school in 2011. A former hospitality and tourism management teacher at Anatole, Mrs. Cambridge Johnson wanted her students to be exposed to the international world of hospitality and tourism management and gave them an avenue to explore their talents. Although she is no longer in the classroom, Mrs. Cambridge Johnson views this as a way to give back and regards her effort as community service. She credited the students for their commitment in the preparation required, and she stated, I quote, "We met every Sunday from September 2014 to April 19, 2015 to ensure that we were well prepared for the competition and the sacrifice paid off," close quote. I just want us to give Mrs. Cambridge Johnson a hand. Can you stand, please? And I'd like now also for all of the students involved in that contest to please stand so we can give you a round of applause. Thank you very much. And raise the trophy for me so they can see the size of the trophy. Yes. I also join my colleague from Southern Shores who has given his congratulations to them, but he is a proud member of Parliament this morning as well. Ms. Cambridge Johnson is a certified hospitality instructor who took advantage of the opportunity to become certified a few years ago when she participated in a partnership between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to note that while we were at the official opening of the Sister Annie Preschool last week, scores of students were participating in the annual Build a Bridge competition. And the team from Anatole Rogers, Mr. Speaker, won the contest for the third consecutive year. And Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the head of the department there at Anatole Rogers, which is a magnet program for engineering, Mr. Oliver Lynch, who is here. If he can stand for us, please, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this is the 6th year of that competition. The first 3 years were won between St. John's and St. Augustine's, and Anatole Rogers came third the first 3 years, Mr. Speaker, that they participated. But they continued to persevere, Mr. Speaker, and now, as I said, that engineering magnet program at Anatole Rogers, Mr. Speaker, they are now the champions 3 years in a row in the Build a Bridge contest, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Anatole Rogers continues to prove that our public schools are producing quality students, as 10 additional students have received scholarships, Mr. Speaker, from the Anatole Rogers School. They are Ms. Aaliyah Roll, Ms. Tisha Outen, Ms. Kendrick Adderley, Ms. Andrea Bryce, Ms. Andres Edgecombe, and Amira Portier all received full scholarships, Mr. Speaker, to the Monroe College, valued at $88,000 over 4 years, Mr. Speaker. furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we have partnered with the Geoforce Institute, which is an institute that studies the formation of rocks, Mr. Speaker, and we have partnered with them, and this year there are 2 students from Anatole Rogers in the 8th grade who were granted scholarships over the summer through the Ministry of Education to attend the Geoforce Scholarship at Texas Jackson School of Geoscience this summer, Mr. Speaker. And that is Miss Cheyenne Roll and Miss Anne Raquel Joseph. Cheyenne Powell, it says Powell here. Lastly, Mr. Azero Roca and Jared Richardson are the proud recipients of basketball scholarships from Christian Hope Academy in Texas, where they will complete their high school basketball career there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is our intention, Mr. Speaker, to provide greater scholarship opportunities for our public school students. And many reputable universities have been approaching the Ministry of Education to enter into memorandums of understanding for scholarships specifically for our public school graduates who meet the required academic standards. So far, we have forged relationships with Middle Tennessee State University and Monroe College, and the president of Florida Memorial University came to visit me recently, and we are working on a memorandum of understanding there. I also received a memorandum of understanding just this week from Taylor University, which I intend to enter into as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to ensure that our students in the public schools were given the best possible chances to qualify for international scholarships, we partnered with the College Board to introduce advanced placement, or AP, into our public senior high schools, Mr. Speaker. Advanced placement allows high school students to pursue courses with college rigor and receive college credits, as well as skip first-year college courses depending on their performance on the AP examinations. Initially, we were launching this pilot program, Mr. Speaker, in only 5 schools. But when the word got out, Mr. Speaker, all of the senior high school principals came forward and said, why leave us out, Mr. Speaker? And so, Mr. Speaker, thanks to our consultant in the ministry, in the Department of Scholarship, Mrs. Monique Hinsey, the training took place for these principals and teachers, and just about all of our high schools now in New Providence and Grand Bahama will be able to launch AP for the first time in our public school system in September of 2015, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a big, big initiative, Mr. Speaker. We are now moving, Mr. Speaker, to prepare our public high school students for the opportunities that exist out there for them to further their education. And as I said before, we're also leveraging the government and the peoples of the Bahamas scholarship dollars, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we provide more opportunities, specifically, Mr. Speaker, to our public high school students. So this is really, Mr. Speaker, a big, big initiative, Mr. Speaker. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, as far as the College of the Bahamas is concerned, Mrs. Hinsey and her team have gone to all of the senior high schools, Mr. Speaker, with College of the Bahamas personnel, and are registering students at the high schools, Mr. Speaker, not waiting for them to come and apply to College of the Bahamas. They are now registering in high schools, Mr. Speaker, and this will continue to evolve and to grow so that our students will know that the government of the Bahamas is supportive of their desire, their wish, their dream to further their education, Mr. Speaker, and we will leave no stone unturned, Mr. Speaker, with regard to our advancement and giving them the best possible opportunity to be successful in whatever field it is they wish to be in, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I move on to close, I want to thank, Mr. Speaker, thank the leader, Mr. Speaker, of Anatole Rogers, the leader, Ms. Myrtle McPhee, Mr. Speaker, and if she can stand for us. Mr. Speaker, we know that nothing happens without great leadership and great vision, Mr. Speaker. And Principal McPhee has been on a quest, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that those students in Anatole Rogers, just like other senior high schools, public high schools throughout the Bahamas, that their students receive the best possible education, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another highlight of the Ministry of Education is the fact that since the beginning of the year, the Ministry of Education has renamed 3 schools, starting with the Spanish Wells All-Age School, which is now the Samuel Guy Pinder All-Age School. Then the Carmichael Primary School was renamed the Sybil Strawn Primary School. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Oaksfield Primary School was renamed the Eva Hilton Primary School, Mr. Speaker. Our official openings began with preschool units in Abaco and at James Pinder Primary and in Foxtown Primary, Mr. Speaker. We then opened the Marjorie Davis Institute for Special Education at a former Our Lady School, a landmark accomplishment for this country, Mr. Speaker. And finally, Mr. Speaker, last week we opened a state-of-the-art Sister Annie Thompson Preschool at the old St. Bede's campus, Mr. Speaker, another major accomplishment. Since the official opening of the Marjorie Davis Institute for Special Education, I am told, Mr. Speaker, that one of the parents in particular of the students has made a request that her child remain at the Marjorie Davis Special Education Institute because, Mr. Speaker, when the child came there from grade 2, Mr. Speaker, the child was unable to read. And in a short time, Mr. Speaker, through testing and intervention, I can proudly say that today that child is reading, Mr. Speaker. Before I take my seat, Mr. Speaker, I also wish to bring to your attention, no, I got plenty more for the budget. This only a little taste. They can find out what's happening in education. Mr. Speaker, though, before I take my seat, I also wish to bring to your attention the monthly publication of the Ministry of Education called eWorld Bahamas. This allows us, Mr. Speaker, to feature activities and programs happening within the ministry and the Department of Education as we capture what is happening in our schools in particular and all the good things that our students are doing, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go on a major campaign blitz, Mr. Speaker, beginning this summer to let the whole Bahamas know and to buy into what we are doing in education. I want to thank those in our communications department for all the hard work they are doing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we remain on the cutting edge in education, I want to encourage all of us to keep abreast of all of the things and exciting things that are happening in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want those listening to join us on Facebook, to search the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology Bahamas. On Instagram, search the Ministry of Education Bahamas. And on Twitter, search Bahamas MOEST, which stands for Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. And like I like to say now, Mr. Speaker, you can like us, post us, tweet us, and follow us on the ministry and in the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm told that the children use a new word now, which is called fleek. So education, they tell me now, education is now on fleek. The young children are smiling. They know, Mr. Speaker. So I now have to educate the rest of us, Mr. Speaker, as we come into the digital world, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, though, before I close, I see Mr. Reginald Saunders is in the audience as well from the Department of Scholarships, Mr. Speaker. And I know this is a very busy time for that. I just want him to stand, Mr. Speaker, and acknowledge his presence and all the hard work, him and his team. Oh, sorry. And I now see Mrs. Monique Hinsey is here. Mrs. Hinsey, if you can stand, please. Mrs. Hinsey, Mr. Speaker, give her a hand. Mr. Speaker, she worked with the Lyford Key Foundation for many years, and my cabinet colleagues agreed for us to bring her on the Ministry of Education to lead this charge to ensure that our public school students, Mr. Speaker, are exposed to all of the opportunities that are available and have been available for schools. And so we are bringing equity, Mr. Speaker, to the educational system. And I want to thank Mrs. Hinsey and her team for all the work they have been doing with the guidance counselors, the principals. I can tell you, the public schools, the senior high public schools are so excited and have embraced her and her team with a great deal of excitement, Mr. Speaker. And so as I stand here this morning, Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that you can see that I am extremely proud of all that has been accomplished by those in the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, who are committed, totally committed, Mr. Speaker, to advancing our young people. And I can tell you, without a doubt, if you have any questions about whether or not the future is bright for this country, Mr. Speaker, today is a clear example that we have a lot to be grateful for, and we have to continue to work. And I pledge my continued support, Mr. Speaker, not only to the people of the Bahamas, but in particular our young people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Shall recognize you in a moment, member. Thank you. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Member for St. Anne's, you stood to be recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I too would like to congratulate Anatole Rogers students on winning the Hospitality Award. Mr. Speaker, this is a major feat that these young people accomplish. To go up against the United States and other countries like Guam and the United States being a major competitor, and to win the overall award, Mr. Speaker, they really, really needs to be congratulated. Mr. Speaker, what I heard from the minister a few minutes ago, some great things are happening at Anatole Rogers. I think what we need to do is to bottle that and try to put it across the nation. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to congratulate and thank Coach Cambridge Johnson for a job well done. Ms. Cambridge Johnson, you might have been a classroom teacher, but what I see here, you went and gave back. And I think more people in this country needs to give back. Even though you're not there, you're still with these kids. I just want to say also, Mr. Speaker, I just see one male in the group. At least we have one. And he needs to be congratulated because, you know, we need young men to step forward to the plate, Mr. Speaker. And I think you need to be congratulated. So, Mr. Speaker, I also want to congratulate Ms. McPhee on a job that she's doing down at Anatole Rogers. You know, they always say good leadership transcends. And what I've seen so far this morning, it has certainly transcends. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to thank these young kids again. You know, to enter a competition for 5 years, and fifth, fourth, and to bring the bacon home this year, that's what you call determination and hard work. So congratulations.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair, I want to recognize the Honorable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, I had the good fortune to serve as Minister of Education many years ago. And I know that it's an enviable task. It's an enviable task particularly because so many people down-talk the quality of education in our public schools. Today's event I wish to address on behalf of the government and the people of the Bahamas is one that should give confidence to Bahamians everywhere that good quality, or rather best quality, can be found in the public education system. And it behooves those of us who have children, who attend public schools, to recognize that and to do what the parents of these young people do, what the principal of these young people's school does, what the teachers in these institutions do, and they would be shocked at the quality of the result that they would get, Mr. Speaker. I always like to say who my teachers were. Carl Francis, Naomi Black, Stevie Bethel, Anatole Rogers. I was lucky. And these youngsters are lucky to have these teachers in charge of them. But there's another facet to this, Mr. Speaker, and that is the captain of the ship. Because one thing is for sure, when things go wrong, the captain is accused. But when things go right, they forget the captain. So I want to salute the captain, Jerome Fitzgerald.
Member for Marathon.
Because, Mr. Speaker, leaders create an environment where those persons who have to follow can flourish. And I have listened to him as he has spoken, as he has brought problems to the table, Mr. Speaker, as he has encouraged and cajoled and insisted, Mr. Speaker, on a new direction in which we can double the investment in education. Because people think of investment as only money. But these teachers, this principal, this minister has poured into students something of themselves. And as a result of it, this is the consequence. I salute you, Madam Principal, and your teachers. I congratulate you, students, all of you looking so nice in your crisp uniforms, medals around the neck. I mean, this is like being in second heaven. I thank you, those teachers who have also poured themselves into these students. And Minister, you're a good man.
The lady from Bahama.
I salute you. So,
The lady from Bahama who every Sunday met.
the lady from Bahama, who every Sunday, that's you too? Ms. Johnson? Stand again. I'm grappling with the problem of parents taking an interest in their students. And so many of them don't have the time, can't make the time. But one of the best investments you can make in young people today in the Bahamas is to give them your time and listen to them and talk to them and encourage them. Cry with them if you like, but let them know that somebody cares. So I thank you, ma'am. I thank your parents. Can you please convey to your parents how pleased I am that they have been so positive in your development, and Madam Principal, we just keep on keeping on. Anatole Rogers would be proud of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Southern Shores.
I know that the students of Anatole have to leave very soon, but I had the opportunity about a week ago, where we had the special assembly to congratulate the winning teams and to celebrate the quality performances this year. But I also want to indicate, and I would like for them to stand, the team that won the Build a Bridge competition for the last 3 years are also sitting here, and they did not have an opportunity to stand, Mr. Speaker. And so with your permission, I just wanted them to stand here this morning so that they would be recognized. Pardon? Yeah, that one has plenty boys, as the Minister of Education wanted to point out. But I also wanted to indicate to those present that Anatole has performed incredibly well this year, Mr. Speaker. Beyond what we have spoken about already, they are also the first place winners in the National Southwestern District Spelling Bee, where we won first place. Because this is in my constituency, all right? And so I want you to understand, I am a timber wolf. I am a part of the wolf pack, all right? And so I speak of my high school this way. But Mr. Speaker, we also won the business, we were in the career and technical education series competition. We won first place in business, first place in hospitality, and second place in building trades. And so as you can see, Mr. Speaker, Anatole is becoming a center for excellence. And I think that even actually the annual agricultural program, we were first place winners in that as well. And so I really want to congratulate Principal McPhee and the entire team at Anatole Rogers, who continue to do a great job. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Wow. Wonderful. You are to be congratulated. Further statements by ministers. Chair recognizes the right honorable member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. I too join with my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, recognizing the preeminence of the achievement of the students at Anatole Rogers for the 15 days in the international competition.
Microphone. Honorable.
15 those who were in the international competition. Mr. Speaker, I pride myself as being as good as anybody in making sauces. You know, and I always challenge people, and well beyond my wife and children, they know that they have to look hard to find someone who could match me in cooking sauce. So I thought I should say that. I'm not just an athlete. I'm not just a Valley Boy Junkanoo, Mr. Speaker. So I truly take a great deal of interest. I'm a gladiator. But a great deal of interest in the achievement of the young people because, Mr. Speaker, it happens that 70 to 75% of the economy of our country is driven by tourism and the resorts. And when you go to resorts around the Bahamas, you see some of them bragging about the prowess of the Bahamian chefs, but you see many chefs who come from abroad because they can't find the quality here. And what we see in the making now are people who will have not only the ability at this stage, but they're going to go abroad as a result of the scholarship they're going to achieve and come back to the Bahamas to have sustainable employment and to lead whatever enterprises that they work for. So Godspeed to them, and I hope that you are seen by your schoolmates as example setters, or as we call exemplars, people who have done well enough for others to say, I won't be like them. So that's what I think of you, and I congratulate you. And I thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a communication, Mr. Speaker, arising out of, in the middle of the carnival, I had to leave the Bahamas to go to Martinique for a conference. And last weekend, in my capacity as the President Chair of the CARICOM Heads of Government, I had the honor to bring opening remarks at a special regional summit on climate change held in Fort-de-France in the French overseas territory of Martinique. We were especially pleased to join on this occasion the President of the Republic of France, Monsieur Francois Hollande, who will chair the conference of the parties to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change when it convenes in Paris in December of this year. The regional summit last weekend, Mr. Speaker, focused on what is indisputably the greatest ecological challenge confronting low-lying states on the planet. And Mr. Speaker, as we consume ourselves with the politics of the Bahamas, it is important that I repeat that. that the summit last weekend, led by the President of France, focused attention on what is indisputably the greatest ecological challenge confronting low-lying states on the planet. It is likely to remain so throughout the 21st century and beyond. Mr. Speaker, the stakes are indescribably high. Indeed, nothing short of our very survival is at stake. Because of the supreme importance of the matter to the future survival of the Bahamas as we know it, I consider it only fitting that I communicate to the Bahamian people in this forum of their elected representatives a slightly abridged version of my remarks at the CARICOM France summit last weekend. For this purpose, I will omit the ceremonial, non-substantive portions of my opening remarks. With that, Mr. Speaker, I now proceed to set out the salient parts of my opening remarks at the CARICOM France summit in Martinique on the 9th of May. And I quote, "Small island developing states have championed the phrase," and I quote, "1 to 5 to stay alive. On the basis of scientific evidence, many have called for a reduction in the level of greenhouse gases so that mean global temperatures will not exceed 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The evidence of the impact of climate change in our region is evident. Mr. Speaker, Grenada saw a 300% loss of GDP as a result of one storm. We see on average across CARICOM a 2 to 5% loss of growth in the region due to responses to hurricanes and tropical processes which occur annually. So that's a 2 to 5% loss, Mr. Speaker, of growth due to hurricanes and natural disasters. For the Bahamas, which has 80% of its landmass within 1 meter of mean sea level, climate change is an existential threat to our landmass. Indeed, that is the story across the region. And what I have said, Mr. Speaker, that if the sea level rises 5 feet, 80% of the Bahamas as we know it will be no more. That in it is the stark reality of that challenge. And I'm told by scientists they have measured a rise so far of 1 foot, Mr. Speaker. So today's gathering, Mr. Speaker, is a good idea that I said, the gathering in Martinique. We have met, Mr. Speaker, in recent times with the President of the United States of America and the President of China. We found a strong commitment on their part to a successful outcome to the conference in December in Paris. This meeting also deepens relations between France and the Caribbean. The Caribbean community reiterates that as the incoming president of what we call COP21, and that is the Paris conference, the urgent need to close the gap between the mitigation pledges by major emitters and the level of effort required to decrease the global average temperature, any Paris outcome must therefore include the following essential elements. There must be clarity on ambitious targets for developed countries, including a long-term goal for significant emission reductions by these countries. There must be clarity on the adaptation measures and resources required to facilitate and enhance the sustainable development plans and programs in small developing countries, and thereby significantly reduce the level of poverty in our developing countries. There must be clarity on measures and mechanisms to address the development challenges associated with climate change, that is, sea level rise and loss of damage for small islands and low-lying coastal developing states. There must be clarity on how the financial and technological support, both for mitigation and adaptation, will be generated and disbursed to small developing countries. Further, it must be recognized that the existing widespread practice of using gross domestic product, GDP per capita, as the primary basis for access to resources simply does not address the reality of the vulnerability of our countries. And Mr. Speaker and colleagues, whether it's the World Bank or any other agency international that applies the criterion of GDP to determine whether or not a country is able to access concessional loans, that we in the Caribbean region have challenged that, Mr. Speaker, and using all within our powers to challenge that rationalization of access to concessional loans. And I'm happy to say that the American government has taken the view that on matters to do with climate change, disaster preparedness, and energy reform, they will no longer oppose in international sessions countries like the Bahamas seeking concessional financing for those particular areas: energy reform, disaster preparedness, and climate change. It must be recognized, therefore, Mr. Speaker, that it is very important for us as a country to continue to address the reality of the vulnerability of our country. We take particular note of the agreements, Mr. Speaker, with the Green Climate Fund, in line with meeting the pledge of securing US $100 billion per year by 2020. The industrial countries of the world have agreed, Mr. Speaker, by 2020 to have a fund that will be $100 billion per year. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is that fund that countries like the Bahamas that must prepare to mitigate the potential disasters, Mr. Speaker, by anticipating them and taking corrective actions, that we will want to access that fund. In seeking to find ways to live up to the financial obligations, we stress, however, that the most vulnerable countries must not be penalized through tax systems which would further impact our services-based economies. I took the opportunity in a bilateral with the President of France, speaking on behalf particularly of the Bahamas, Antigua, Bermuda, who is also would be reckoned in this regard, and Barbados, to indicate to the President of France that we have, in anti-terrorism laws and anti-money laundering laws, we have passed laws that are stricter than laws in the countries that are members of the OECD group, that apply strict accountability to us. And we would wish the President of France to accept that integrity is seen to be our commitment, and that they should therefore not use their tax systems and tax laws to cause countries like the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, to have to be diminished in our effort to have a way of life that is consistent, Mr. Speaker, with what the countries like France are looking to have for their own populations. The particular references to taxing international maritime and air transport we find particularly troubling. I invited the President to continue to give this climate change issue and the wider financial issues the highest priority, and to lend his nation, France's considerable international clout and the personal prestige of his office and its clout to conclude a satisfactory and binding agreement in Paris in the fall. Mr. Speaker, history will not judge us kindly if we fail, because particularly for countries in the Caribbean, countries like the Maldives that are already below sea level, these countries, their survivability is at stake. And the President of France indicated that that was the reason why he had flown to the region to have a meeting preceding the meeting in Paris with what he considers to be the center of concern, and that is countries in the Caribbean. As a result of the impacts of climate change, the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, which spearheads the technical work for CARICOM on this issue, estimates the cost of global inaction in the sub-region to be approximately US $10.7 billion per year by 2025, and that this figure could double by 2050. So this is absolutely serious and absolutely deserving of the highest priority. We, Mr. Speaker, and I'm speaking for the Caribbean, urge the parties that have made pledges towards the initial capitalization of the Green Climate Fund, that's the $100 billion a year fund, to enter into their contribution agreements as soon as possible and scale up their contributions in line with the pledge for US $100 billion per year by 2020. For the region, climate change magnifies the growing concerns regarding food security, water scarcity, energy security, and the resource requirements for protection from natural disasters. Another significant threat is linked to the projected impact of climate change on public health through an increase in the presence of vectors of tropical diseases such as malaria and dengue, and the prevalence of respiratory diseases and illnesses. These diseases will affect the well-being and productivity of the workforce of the sub-region and compromise the economic growth, competitiveness, and development potential of the Caribbean community. Heat stress is also an issue. France can identify with heat stress, and as a result of the unprecedented heat wave, which had an enormous adverse social, economic, and environmental effect, such as the death of thousands of vulnerable elderly people across Europe in 2003. The region is not fully able to adapt to or mitigate the loss and damages associated with climate change-induced processes. Our situation is rendered especially urgent in the face of information that ocean acidification, sea surface temperatures, and sea levels are already rising. These processes, particularly sea level rise, will therefore irreversibly change the geography and ecology of many coastal states and territories. It has been projected that responding to these factors can have particularly disastrous consequences, causing a perpetual recession in each of the CARICOM member states for significant periods as our infrastructure, built environment, settlements, and economic well-being are concentrated in coastal areas prone to flooding and inundation. And that, Mr. Speaker, is a complete reference to the Bahamas, where our infrastructure is destroyed by hurricanes when they impact our islands, and we have to constantly rebuild them. And Mr. Speaker, so it has enormous implications to the future. The region's challenge associated with the ongoing climate change negotiations is that even if the goal to limit global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius is achieved, the Caribbean will experience severe adverse impacts for which stronger programs of adaptation would have to be implemented. We most strongly advance the view that in this current situation, the global architecture on climate change needs to be redesigned to also facilitate and promote the development of developing countries. As a region of small developing countries, regional policymakers have generally acknowledged the significant role of multilateralism. On that basis, the region is prepared to work for and is optimistic that at the conference in Paris, the appropriate actions will be taken to establish a new framework for global cooperation on climate change. At the very least, such a framework should address the basic requirements for the survival of the small island, low-lying coastal development states. The ongoing collaboration between one of our member states, Dominica, and France, to advance a project in the area of geothermal energy can be replicated. The application of French technology to our natural assets could form the basis for growth of a renewable energy sector in the region. This would bolster our energy security, cut the high energy costs, and assist in the global battle against greenhouse gas emissions. The Bahamas does not have the benefit of geothermal capacity, but we have advanced a national energy policy that calls for a minimum of 30% of our energy generation comprising renewable energy by 2033. We have passed legislation this year making the grid tie connection for solar and wind legal. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Carbon War Room, which will allow for 20 megawatts of utility-scale solar power throughout our archipelago of islands. We have also launched a net billing program for the residential and commercial customers, which, if maximized, will allow an additional 25 megawatts of solar and of wind being connected to our grids. Storage technology for solar is critically important to us. The application of French technology in this area would benefit Caribbean countries like the Bahamas and Bermuda. And Mr. Speaker, I took the opportunity in a meeting with the President to impress upon the President the opportunities for French companies in the Bahamas. France can be a vibrant development partner to our community. Such a development would be most welcome, even more so if spurred by a sector that benefits the global family as much as it does our region. It is my hope that this day will be the one, and Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking of last Saturday that I spoke in Martinique. It is my hope that this day will be the one that history will record as a new beginning of a strengthened relationship between France and the Caribbean. So, Mr. Speaker, such then was my opening address at the regional summit in Martinique on the 9th of May 2015. It remains only for me to conclude by once again emphasizing how critical this entire issue of climate change is for our archipelagic nation. We are an exceptionally low-lying country. This fact alone means that climate change and its ecological companion, sea level rise, global warming, must necessarily be central to the present and future planning of whatever is going to be in government, beg your pardon, Mr. Speaker, must be necessarily be central to the present and future planning of whoever is going to be in government during the 21st century. Meaning, Mr. Speaker, that if there is one area where there ought to be unanimity at the political level, it is on our approach to climate change. And that, Mr. Speaker, is because there are people alive today in our country who can point to the ocean, into the water, and say that when they were children, they picnicked on the beach where the ocean now is. And that evidence exists for anyone who goes to our islands and talk to people where the ferocity of the water, the sea, has claimed and continues to claim the land. Let us therefore not underestimate the scale, the magnitude, and the absolutely crucial importance of this subject as we attend to the governance and management of our country, as we attend to its land and marine resources, and most important of all, its people, now and for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Right Honorable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
On Thursday, the 30th of April, 2015, I announced the selection of Power Secure International, Inc. as the preferred bidder to manage the new BEC, both generation and transmission distribution for a period of 5 years, subject to the negotiation and finalization of the management contract, the major terms of which have been agreed. This decision was taken in consideration of the unanimous recommendation of the task force appointed to review the proposals and its financial advisors, KPMG Advisory Services, its technical advisors, DNVGL, and as a result of an extensive, robust, and patient request for proposal process. Mr. Speaker, the National Energy Policy 2013-2033 identified 6 priority areas to guide us to sustainable energy reform. The cited areas are security of energy supply through diversification of fuels, modernizing of the energy infrastructure, development of renewable energy sources such as solar, ocean energy, biofuels, waste to energy, and wind, energy conservation and efficiency, development of a comprehensive governance, regulatory framework to protect the consumer, effectively support the advancement of the energy sector, and to facilitate the introduction of renewables and the diversification of fuels. And, Mr. Speaker, lastly, eco-efficiency in the manufacturing, agricultural, and tourism sectors, and government as leaders in energy conservation and the use of renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, a key step toward reform is the restructuring of the Bahamas Electricity Corporation, BEC, to create efficiencies which will allow for significant reductions in the cost of energy, reliability of service, increased energy security, and environmental responsibility. All of these will assist the Bahamas to meet the articulated goal of a modern, diversified, and efficient energy sector, which provides Bahamians with affordable energy supplies, thereby enhancing our international competitiveness and sustainable prosperity. We are well on the road to fulfilling our Charter of Governance commitment toward ensuring a positive bottom line effect on the pockets of the average Bahamian and business owner. We have taken very deliberate steps to get to this point. The amendment to the Bahamas Electricity Act, which we delivered earlier this year, was critical to what we do now. Mr. Speaker, the RFP for the management of BEC was issued in August 2013 and advertised widely in the Bahamas and internationally. From the RFP, we sought to ultimately identify a suitable company to manage all functions of the existing BEC under a new structure. That company would, to the extent required, bring access to capital for investment in the generation side of the business as a partner to the government. Further, the company would assist us in addressing the significant legacy liabilities of BEC, totaling more than $450 million, in an efficient manner, facilitating BEC's capacity to invest in much more needed new equipment. These legacy liabilities include bank debt and bonds, overdue payables, a deficit in the pension plan, and environmental liabilities not yet quantified, as well as restructuring costs going forward. As the process evolved, taking into account the various challenges, in particular the issue of restructuring the large amount of legacy debt, the structure was adjusted such that the relevant assets, including land, excluding land, and business of BEC, would be transferred to a single entity, the new BEC, and government itself would procure offers for the refinancing of the legacy debt. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note
the key components that brought us from that initial 13 bidders of August 2013 to this point. By the 13th of September of that year, 9 bidders submitted technical proposals. 3 of the bids were rejected. By the 15th of November, 5 of the remaining bidders submitted pricing proposals. And on the 24th of December, each were asked for further particulars of their proposals. On the 31st of January 2014, 4 bidders submitted revised pricing proposals. Each of them, in February and March of 2014, made presentations to the task force that included representatives of the Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Works, Ministry of Environment and Housing, the Attorney General's Office, along with the government's advisors. From April to July, the task force and the government's advisors undertook a detailed assessment of bid proposals and alternatives put forward by bidders. In accordance with the process, the task force made recommendations to Cabinet on the next steps and for the refinancing of the legacy debt. On the 29th of August 2014, 3 bidders were invited to a final round of evaluations. These evaluations included site visits by a government delegation to bidder facilities over the period September to November 2014. Negotiations on the management contract terms were pursued in earnest and finalized during November, December 2014. Mr. Speaker, when the government set out in pursuit of a manager for BEC, we were firm in the criteria for the preferred bidder. We sought out the company best able to extract value from the existing New Providence generation assets, including advanced asset management, efficiency retrofits, improved operating schemes, fuel selection and purchasing schemes, effective supply chain, emergency response planning, preparation and execution, and training employees in proper maintenance techniques. As well, the company had to have the ability to manage the building of a new major generation in New Providence, including objective development and financial evaluation of options, design and engineering capabilities, managing construction on time and on budget, operating the selected option, and optimizing fuel source for the selected option. Further, the company had to have the ability to extract value from existing assets on the Family Islands, including advanced asset management and fuel selection and purchasing schemes. In respect of both New Providence and the Family Islands, the company had to have the ability to procure and or manage the building of renewable energy projects, supplemented with selective replacement of fossil fuel plants, including control schemes and integration system design, small fossil fuel installation experience, and renewable generation experience. We also determined that the company must have the ability to improve the availability and reliability of the transmission and distribution systems to improve efficiency through state-of-the-art asset management, planning for system and capacity expansions to meet new and increasing loads, use of live line maintenance and construction methods, effective supply chain, emergency response planning, preparation and execution, and as I said before, training of employees in proper construction and maintenance techniques for line and station work. We deemed it necessary that the company demonstrate its ability to effectively manage the customer services functions, including advanced metering infrastructure, to include prepaid metering, the ability to detect theft, and the ability to remotely disconnect and disconnect power. Other modalities would have included effective management of the bill rendering cycle, the collection cycle, and efficient management of service requests and the call center function. The success of any company is commensurate, Mr. Speaker, to the efficiency of its staff. It is therefore an imperative that the company commit to proactive management relationships, including employee and union relations and community interface. This commitment requires the incorporation of a health and safety program to include safety rules and policies, energy control, switching and tagging functions, safety training, and field audits of work. While these were the overarching criteria for the RFP, it is a given that the company must align with and support the realization of government's national energy policy goals and objectives, and set out an overall strategy for sustainable cost reduction without compromise to reliability and the environment. The company is also required to be equally sensitive to the diverse needs of the family islands and articulate a strategy to meet those needs. Mr. Speaker, PowerSecure, a public company in the United States of America, is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, which is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Extensive information concerning its ownership and activities is available online for any interested party. However, I am pleased to read its credits into the record of this House. PowerSecure is widely held with no single controlling shareholder. Headquartered in Wake Forest, North Carolina, it has total assets of $265 million, shareholders' equity of $157 million, trailing 12-month revenues of $283 million, and for the period the 31st of March, to the 31st of March 2015, and market capitalization of $318 million. That is as of the 11th of May 2015. It has grown considerably over the last several years, posting on average over a 25% compound annual growth rate. In addition, based on its most recent investor presentations last week, it holds a strong contract backlog of $402 million. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, since January 2014, it has announced more than $400 million in new business. As of the 15th of March 2015, it was 95% owned by institutional and mutual fund owners. The company's largest shareholder is Wellington Management Company, an investment manager with $900 billion under management. Other notable shareholders include Dimensional Fund Advisors, SRB Management, BlackRock Fund Advisors, Vanguard Group, AWM Investment Company, Becker Drapkin Management, and other major, primarily U.S.-based institutions and funds. Mr. Speaker, PowerSecure's 33-year energy veteran and founder, Mr. Sidney Hinton, continues to serve as its president and CEO. Prior to the establishment of PowerSecure, he worked for Carolina Power and Light, which is now Progress Energy, Southern Company, and Georgia Power Company. Under his leadership at PowerSecure, close to 1,000 employees across the United States operate and maintain 1 GW of distributed generation capacity. It reported 98.4% reliability of these systems in 2014, which is one of the best in the industry. Its three-pronged operations take in utility services, that is engineering and infrastructure solutions, power generation, which is distributed energy and solar installation and management, and energy efficiency, including production of its own LED lighting systems. The company serves many of the largest utilities in the United States. PowerSecure specializes as well, Mr. Speaker, in utility-scale solar power through its subsidiary, PowerSecure Solar, and has provided both solar and storm hardening services to multiple utility customers. Of particular note, its efficient mobilization of resources for every named storm in the last 5 years. As recently as January this year, it mobilized utility support during the severe winter weather and snowstorms in the northern United States. It also performs rate and cost of service analysis studies and an entire array of system studies using latest technology. It has completed hundreds of projects for utilities, industrial and government organizations, and other specialty clients. Mr. Speaker, the company's power services and generation group has a team of managers with significant investor-owned, cooperative and municipal utility managerial experience. As utility directors, senior engineers, and senior VPs of engineering, Power Services provides traditional electrical engineering services to electric utility clients and others. This government has never questioned, Mr. Speaker, this government has never questioned the qualification and capability of BEC's management and staff. We are keenly aware
Members,
of the material challenges.
honorable members,
With this in view, we are confident that the PowerSecure team, in consultation with the experienced engineers at BEC, will collaborate effectively to plan, design, procure, and construct generation, transmission, distribution, substation projects, and utility communication projects for the new BEC. PowerSecure's Utility Engineering Division provides engineering, project and construction management, and quality control services for turnkey design build, utility infrastructure projects, along with testing and commissioning for an array of power delivery and smart grid systems. Its team has completed projects for private and public entities, including the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Air Force, the Department of Veterans Affairs, NASA, and both large and small industrial clients and utilities. Mr. Speaker, the selection of the new manager is the primary step in the overall restructuring of BEC and reform of the energy sector. We have now turned our attention to the next steps, which include the finalization of the management contract with PowerSecure. At the same time, we are in the process of establishing a transition committee as per the agreement. This committee will consist of well-versed business and technical persons. The business plan will be a contractual document once approved by the board of the new BEC, and the quantum of the management fees will be tied to meeting the targets set out in this business plan. The task force is also in the process of considering and recommending on several robust proposals submitted by world-class banks to raise monies by way of a rate reduction bond to retire the legacy debt. In the near future, we also expect to enter into a rate reduction bond mandate with a preferred bank for the refinancing of the legacy liabilities without a government guarantee, as well as providing monies for the working capital and other needs of the new BEC. At the satisfaction of these requirements, government will table legislation to establish the new BEC, transferring the operating assets and certain liabilities from the existing BEC to this new company. That legislation will establish a completely new and non-partisan board to oversee the management contract and operation of the new BEC. With its credits, the government of the Bahamas is satisfied that Power Secure has the technical, operational, and financial capacity required to manage the new BEC. Mr. Speaker, we sincerely thank those bidders that were not selected for their broad engagement, contribution to the process, professionalism, and patient tolerance of the process. We especially thank our technical and financial advisors and the government of the task force have all undertaken extensive due diligence on the existing financial and operational conditions at BEC, the various bidders, and all of the options put forward by those bidders. With confidence, Mr. Speaker, we now look forward to the establishment of the new BEC under the supervision of Power Secure. As promised, we are well on the way to delivering to our constituents a 100% Bahamian-owned, world-class electrical utility offering its customers affordable and reliable power and a tremendously improved customer service. As the transition unfolds, I commit to bring further updates to this House. In the meantime, we encourage all stakeholders to remain steadfast in their work toward the goal of more efficient, more reliable service at a more cost-effective rate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for North Andros and the Berries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to welcome to this historic chamber representatives of the Nurses Association of the Bahamas, led by their president, Ms. Paulette Cash. They are here today to mark the 52nd anniversary of their existence as an association. The Nurses Association, Mr. Speaker, has affiliation with the International College of Nursing, the Royal College of Nursing of the UK, and the Commonwealth Nurses Association. Their main purpose is maintaining education and professionalism. Any one of us who has ever been sick would know the importance of good nursing to the welfare of any patient. And we in the Bahamas are blessed with having some of the finest nurses in the world. When I saw that professionalism was part of their mantra, what came to mind was the experience here in the Bahamas earlier this year with Ebola, or the fear of Ebola. Amidst the claims that we were not ready or prepared, there was a threat of Ebola to this country with a flight coming in from Canada, passing through Tennessee. radioed our airport saying that there was a suspected patient on that flight. So the preparations went into action at our airport. And I was never so proud to see a public health nurse adorn the PPEs, the protective equipment, and walked up the steps of that plane and entered to assess the situation. We communicated with her from my office by cell phone, and everything turned out to be just fine. But the courage and professionalism displayed by that nurse is a tribute to the profession in general. In the Bahamas, nurses form a particular niche in the healthcare system. In an archipelagic nation like ours, we cannot do without our nurses. In fact, in many situations, nurses perform as doctors and do a wonderful job for our country. We look forward to the day when all of our islands will be covered by physicians. But until then, until then. And so many of us here have families who have been nurses. And our nurses in the Bahamas really have a rich tradition, led by the early days, Hilda Bowen and other great nurses who have passed on. And so I salute you on your accomplishments and your professionalism, and to keep the good work up for the benefit of our archipelago and the Bahamas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. A member for Kalani.
Mr. Speaker, like the member for North Andros, Minister of Health, I too would like to congratulate the Nurses Association on their 52nd anniversary of existence, and I'd like to congratulate their president, Cash. Mr. Speaker, I think lots of people don't understand the significance and the important role nurses and the association play. It's a noble profession, yet throughout the Bahamas understaffed. And Mr. Speaker, I can always recall that as a consultant gynecologist obstetrician in the hospital, on numerous occasions, I had ran into great difficulty, not only in delivery, but also during surgical procedures. And being a humble surgeon and individual, I had sought the advice of the nursing personnel who were assisting me. And Mr. Speaker, with their experience, they were able to guide me through. So I would advise the doctors within the hospital to take knowledge of the nurses' experience because they can be assisted greatly. But I also recall, Mr. Speaker, during an industrial action in the hospital, when the physicians, junior physicians went off staff, and only senior physicians like myself were working emergency room and other aspects of the hospital. And after 48 hours, we were completely burnt out, and it was the nurses who continued to carry the healthcare system of our institution. And I think that is very, very significant because it shows how important the role of the nursing personnel are. But Mr. Speaker, as was pointed out, the nurses play a significant role in the Family Island. They act as physicians, and their specialty continues to grow. We have nurse anesthetists, nurse physician, and in fact, some parts of the Caribbean, they play that role and put patients asleep and act as physicians. And I can see in the not too distant future that posing problems within the Bahamas among the physician themselves, because sooner or later we would recognize that the nurses can do quite a lot of the job that the physicians do. And that is posing a problem today within the United States. So it's only a matter of time before that poses a problem here also. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate the nursing personnel for the excellent, noble role that they're playing. And I advise more Bahamians to enter such a noble profession, though the salary is not what it should be, considering the work that they do. They still continue to work for the goodwill of the country and to serve our country honorably. And I would advise many more to enter such a profession, because we are grossly short and we need many more nurses. And they are given scholarships and stipend to enter such honorable profession. And I'm sure the government would continue to provide such stipend, because I'm certain that after we become government, such stipend will continue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Member for South Beach.
Mr. Speaker, quite naturally, I stand to congratulate the Nurses Association on their 52nd anniversary. And Mr. Speaker, also, I don't think some of us are aware that yesterday was the International Nurses Day. And I was fortunate, honored, and happy enough to visit with the Nurses Association yesterday morning on their celebration of Nurses Day. So I say to all nurses in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, happy Nurses Day. Yesterday, of course, was the birthday of Florence Nightingale, the mother of nursing in this modern world. Mr. Speaker, as a nurse, I am truly honored and proud. Nurses, as one would have said, is the backbone of the health care in this country. And as nurses are multifaceted, as the member for Kalani would have said, you have nurses anesthetists, you have nurses practitioners, and Mr. Speaker, while I am on that, I would like to just plug right in here, Mr. Speaker, the need to have the Nurses and Midwives Act come to this Parliament so that, Mr. Speaker, the old act that was in place since Christ knows when, Mr. Speaker, under all administration, Mr. Speaker, it needs to come to this Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to, we have some nursing students here. And the reason why I'm bringing that to our attention, Mr. Speaker, is because we need more Bahamian nurses in our organizations. And Mr. Speaker, if we as a people understand, I remember, Mr. Speaker, when nursing training was moving from the nursing school to the College of Bahamas, we were talking about the need to have nursing in the nursing school so that we can have a continuity of nursing coming out in the training, and we will not have the demand for importing so much nurses. We were told that we didn't know what we were saying at the time, but now we have an extreme shortage for nurses in this country. And Mr. Speaker, had the vision had been carried out, then we would not have this problem. So, Mr. Speaker, nurses work very hard. And on the Family Island, we have the nurses who are prescribed. They see the patient, they prescribe the medication, and they dispense the medication. So we in this country, we are very proud of our nurses, and I hope that the government will see the valuable service that nurses give in this country and treat them accordingly. Congratulations Madam President, who is a nurses practitioner. Congratulations to you and your team, and may God bless you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Member for Bain and Grandstand.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot let this occasion go without expressing my thanks and appreciation to members of the nursing profession. Oh, you think it was wrong? Mr. Speaker, most of us in here were probably delivered by nurses, by the midwives. Most of us in here. And Mr. Speaker, that speaks volumes about the role the nurses have played in the healthcare system in our country for many years. Like the member for Kadani, we could not be successful in our professions without the support of well-qualified nurses. Indeed, I would venture to say that the nurses in our profession are amongst the more qualified nurses that there are and have always been so. And all of us learn a lot from them. He's absolutely right. You know, when the baby ready to come, and ready to come. And if you're in your office and it's only the midwife and she got to do it for you, and then, you know, I used to tell them, hold it for me, just till I reach. Don't let it come out. Huh? Me? But to be serious, sir, I'm very sympathetic to the view expressed by the member for South Beach that we do something with the Nurses and Midwives Act that has been there from thy kingdom come. I don't think it was there for that long, but we are overdue for an upgrading and a modernization, not only of the legislation, but of the opportunities for nurses in our country, Mr. Speaker. And so I pledge on behalf of the government, what you all ought to do, through you, Mr. Speaker, is bring to the attention of the government those things that they would like to be reformed from their perspectives. And we will, in consultation with our friends from the other side, I think that this is the kind of subject on which we will have unanimous consent from both sides of the aisle. And so on behalf of our government and the people of the Bahamas, I want to thank you, ladies, who are representatives of what we call a noble profession. But I want you to all tell the leader of the opposition that nobility has a value. And so you're making promises that you wouldn't be able to keep.
I acknowledge that my mother.
Huh? Yes, he's making promises that he would not be able to keep. But although we are on opposite sides of the aisle, we have a commonality of interest in the upgrading, modernization of the nursing profession. And you know that with the leader of our party, who always says two things when he gets up: who he was, and who he was is the son of a nurse, who I had the benefit of working with at the early stages of my career. And so you're in very good hands. I see earlier today there were some policemen in here, members of the Police Staff Association, I believe. So they got me if they know how to get me. Because my father was a policeman. Yes, my father was a policeman. So they have no problem with me. Similarly, the mother of the Prime Minister was a nurse. And he always says that only one thing he needs in life, and that is that when he dies, that he sees his mother again. And that's a very profound desire. And so I just want to, on behalf of ourselves, congratulate them on their 52nd anniversary, thank them for the stellar work that they have done for our country and its health system, and encourage them to keep on keeping on. You are not forgotten, and we will do all that we can to assist you in your future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable members. We have had a number of wonderful tributes, as it turned out, for the nurses, and that's certainly deserving. And I too also have the privilege from where I sit to recognize the profound work that nurses do. Both of my parents-in-laws, Pastor Burton Smith and Barbara Smith, retired nurses, and I hear their war stories. And I salute them as I salute you today for your work. Continue to do so. Yeah. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Angliston.
Sorry, Mr.
I have a
Speaker.
feeling this is a tribute too.
Well, it's a very short one because on the 52nd anniversary, Mr. Speaker, the Nurses Association has very kindly targeted the Angliston community to deal with issues of healthcare and public safety. And this Saturday, they're having a health fair on the Angliston Park beginning at 9 a.m. And they'll be doing blood pressure testing, sugar levels testing, general counseling, and there'll be public advertisement on the issue. But we're inviting all the people in the community, Mr. Speaker, to take advantage of this opportunity to be educated on their health status and to be able to move forward in a way that enhances their health for the rest of their life, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to also give credit and pay tribute to the nurses. Any of us who've been in the hospital, I've been there a few times having babies, and Mr. Speaker, the nurses that attend, I always have the same 3 every time, and they were excellent women who I remember to this day. My youngest child is 24. And so the care, the patience, the gentle touch, the transmutation into that, whatever level that is, that untouchable thing, the intangible, that they bring to the table. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend them and to encourage them to continue in their work, to know they're appreciated in New Providence and throughout the country, as you've heard, where they hold the fort for health care throughout our nation, and to say we hold you up. Most of you are women, not all, but we hold you up, we encourage you, and we say to you that we as a nation appreciate, love, respect, and regard you. And we ask you to continue to go from strength to strength in the work that you do and bringing healing and peace and comfort to a nation of people who are in the healthcare system or in the homes and the communities, wherever you find them. And we pray that you will get what you've been promised in this parliament. When you hear politicians speak with this media, you have to be cautious, but I believe on this one, they will deliver. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. Further statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Carmichael.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would also wish to join my colleagues in thanking the nursing profession, congratulating them on their 52nd anniversary of nursing in the Bahamas. All of us know very well the kind of work that they do, and hats off to the next generation who are also here present, so you all would see what a noble profession you're in, and it is one of the greatest things in life to be able to help people to heal. When the results are astounding, when you see people who are not doing well, and they come in and they think it's all over, and you get to see them walk out that door, and they look behind and smile and say thank you. And so on behalf of all of them, thank you from us. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give a communication on a great 3-week period that we've had in the Bahamas. I think a May to remember. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Prime Minister, member for Centerville, on scoring what I called a grand hat-trick. He went to Grand Bahama and launched one of the greatest ideas ever seen, Grand Bahama Junkanoo Carnival kickoff. Came back to Nassau and saw the second edition of the World Relays, IWF World Relays Bahamas. And then 1 week later, launched the first ever Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival in grand style. Mr. Speaker, special thanks also to all of the partners who participated in these events, the Bahamian people who came out mightily. And as I said, this was a month to remember. In the years to come, young kids and grandchildren will ask their parents and grandparents the question of where were you when these things occurred? Where were you? On the 2nd of May, where were you? At the Thomas Augustus Robinson Stadium, the most touted athletic event of this year, the highly successful IAAF World Relays occurred in the world this year. Not only do the many international athletes who continue to express their satisfaction with the entire event, but we can again boast of having an additional 2 new world records being set right here in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, we saw the fastest man on the planet on what is now touted as the fastest track on the planet in our own backyard. For those out there who want to get the best information on this in the world, it's not coming from us in the Bahamas, or not from our little ministry. It comes from spikes.iaaf.org, spikes.iaaf.org. And Spike says, I quote, "This event has gone from Bahamazing to now what they feel is a Bahamania. The IAAF World Relays 2015 proved to be yet another success and was said to be even more explosively fantastic than last year's inaugural event. The sun, sand, and sea of the paradise of the Bahamas has added a 4th and more exciting element, sports, as the event showed the capacity of the Bahamas as a whole and the cadre of the talented Bahamians to run an international sporting event of this magnitude. Mr. Speaker, it is of note that the Bahamas has now been invited to 3 international events in order to speak on what has happened at the World Relays and has received the Television Sports Writers Award of 2014-2015. One material difference in this year, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to last year, was that this event was managed only by Bahamians. This was made in the Bahamas for Bahamians and by Bahamians. A Bahamian cast has produced this event from top to bottom. It was placed squarely in the hands of Bahamians. They managed the process from top to bottom, Mr. Speaker, with only periodic consultation with the IAAF every 90 days in specialized areas that requested from them for television rights only, all of whom deserve kudos from the positive comments made from people all around the world. It was certainly not without the hard work, but the drive and determination, commitment, and skill needed to be successful were all ingredients that were brought to bear by the local organizing committee led by Mr. Keith Parker, Mr. Mike Sands, and Mr. Grafton Eiffel. Tasks from the organization of all aspects of the event down to the officiating on the track, all young Bahamians. If we were to seek the event's volunteers, who number in the thousands, and we had to pay for this, Mr. Speaker, it would be absolutely impossible. The LOC had 161 people working, volunteers 700, service staff 300, security staff 287. The numbers for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the Royal Bahamas Police Force were in the hundreds. On the international front, this event conducted over the 2 days of May 2nd and May 3rd, 2015, saw 688 participants in 10 events, 5 male events and 5 female events. The coaches and officials totaled 187 in numbers, and in addition to athletes and officials, service providers, we saw another 420 persons come for the event. These numbers do not include, Mr. Speaker, the IAAF Council, staff, and accompanying guests. 150 people from the IAAF itself attended these games in Nassau, the Bahamas, bringing the number of persons coming to the Bahamas to approximately 1,524 persons from this organization. All told, the number of persons accredited and involved in the event totaled just over 5,000 people. When factoring in the vendors and their participating staff, a survey completed for the inaugural edition, and compared to this year's event, we have surpassed the numbers of last year, sir, and that stadium facilitated 42,000 people over a 2-day weekend. Mr. Speaker, the local accounting firm of Deloitte & Touche has been commissioned to carry out the Economic Impact Assessment, EIA, for this year's edition. And we anticipate an even greater financial impact than was seen in last year. Our preliminary figures from the Atlantis Hotel show a utilization of 4,744 room nights. We reported initially 838 rooms utilized from April 30th to May 2nd. This also does not include the members of the IAAF and athletes who stayed in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, for an extra week, many of whom traveled to the Family of Islands and returned to Nassau for the first edition of Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival. Mr. Speaker, the 2014 World Relay Championships was televised in 161 countries. This year, 24 cameras, a rail cam, we understand that the relays were seen in even more countries, the total coming out as 181 countries, touching, Mr. Speaker, several 100 million households around the world. Finally, Mr. Speaker, during the press conference prior to the event, attended by over 100 international press executives, the president of the IAAF, Monsieur Lamine Diack, stated, and I quote, "The Bahamas is a natural home for the world relays." And with the IAAF body agreeing to allow the Bahamas to host the event once again in 2017, it is up to us to continue to improve on this record and wow the attendees and to make that statement a permanent place and make this place the home of the world relays. Mr. Speaker, during this time, 2 more world records were set in Nassau, the Bahamas. As we said, 42,000 guests over the weekend. The Bahamas won a silver in the men's 4x4 relay, and we saw a thrilling finale in the 4x200 female relay, where we just missed the mark. Mr. Speaker, this would bring for this track a total of 5 world records in the space of a 2-year period in the same location. This is unprecedented in athletics and why we call our track the fastest track on the planet. Both world records this year were set by the United States of America in the men's and women's distance medley, and many of the world's finest athletes here to participate, including the most recognized person in the sport and the athletics world, Mr. Usain Bolt, who further commented on the Bahamas that the event, the place, and the people are absolutely top class. Mr. Speaker, I wish to commend Team Bahamas for their gallant effort in the World Relays, where we got the opportunity, where we got the opportunity to witness a new generation of athletes begin to emerge into prominent roles on our teams. Special recognition, Mr. Speaker, goes out to young Stephen Gardner, a native of Abaco and a product of the renowned Moores Island Sports Academy. Young Gardner ran an amazing 44.58 split, propelling the team into gold medal contention and the eventual silver medal behind the powerful United States of America. If he had only gone out a little slower, he says, he knows he could have taken that race. And I think he's right. Mr. Speaker, young Gardner has a lot to offer in this sport and will be a contender to be part of the 4x4 men's relay team for next year in the Rio Olympics. Also deserving special mention, Mr. Speaker, is young athlete Miss Brianne Bethel, who at only 16 years of age, ran her leg of the relay, teaming up with veteran Golden Girl Debbie Ferguson McKenzie, with the speed of more seasoned athletes and everyone from around the world at her side. It was unfortunate, however, that the team would eventually be disqualified for an exchange beyond the allowable zone. But I tell you, Brianna Bethel is here to stay. Mr. Speaker, that weekend, Bahamians also got to see their rising star, Just this past weekend, again, Sean A. Miller and Jeffrey Gibson both participated in the Jamaica Invitational held in Kingston, Jamaica. And we demonstrated our sports prowess again. First, Jeffrey Gibson distinguished as the 2013-14 Senior Male Athlete of the Year and the 2014 Commonwealth Games bronze medalist and national record holder in the 400-meter hurdles. Gibson demonstrated his continued good form by powering his way to yet another bronze medal in his specialty at the 400-meter hurdles at his competition. Gibson's feat was shortly followed by Ms. Shawn A. Miller. Ms. Miller, running the 200 meters event, stunned the capacity crowd in Kingston, 35,000 Jamaicans strong. She came down the home stretch on her way to victory, leaving Olympic and world champion gold medalist Shelly Ann Fraser-Price in her wake. Shawn A's world-leading time of 22:14 eclipsed a 9-year record held by Debbie Ferguson.
Yeah.
That's the Bahamian record that was held by Debbie Ferguson of 22:19. Mr. Speaker, Lamine Diak, upon leaving the Bahamas, wanted to leave two things for the Prime Minister. One, I don't know, Mr. Forbes, if you could get me that poster there. One, Mr. Prime Minister, Lamine Diak left a commemorative poster here for you. Yeah, it was there for you last week. I think you were traveling. This is the commemorative poster from the IAAF to commemorate the inaugural edition held here in the Bahamas. As that you were the one who got the way, who got the ball rolling and getting us this world-class event. And secondly, I think Norwich wanted that one. I have one for Norwich. Secondly, Mr. Prime Minister, Lamine Diak said of the Bahamas that he has never, ever seen a stadium and fans like the ones he saw. And although that we did not get everything we wanted out of the event, he left something for you, sir, on behalf of the IAAF and to be put into the hands of yourself for the Bahamian people for long-standing holding. The IAAF has presented the Bahamas with a gold medal as a country. This is from the IAAF. Prime Minister, this is from the President of the IAAF on behalf of that organization to the people of the Commonwealth of Bahamas. So, there you go. You always want a gold medal, you got one. Hey, PM, PM, you got to watch the audit, you'll take this too. You take that too. Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, if I'm permitted in the interest of time, I roll into my second.
Unless it's combined. Fine. Okay. You may.
Mr. Speaker, now I wish to say a few words about another successful event held this past weekend in the Bahamas. Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival, an overall success. We have to say thank you to the Bahamas National Festival Commission, the Permanent Secretary and staff of the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, the government of the Bahamas, thanks to the Bahamian people, most of all, for showing their support in absolute record numbers. I have never seen a crowd like that. Mr. Speaker, most of all, with the Prime Minister's vision, we have laid the foundation for a truly spectacular festival that has the potential to go beyond our wildest expectations. Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival created a safe and festive space and incorporated all things Bahamian: creativity, culture, community, and the celebration of Bahamian food, music, art, craft, and yes, Junkanoo. This was, Mr. Speaker, the biggest ever public event we have had in the history of this country, by far. Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival, Mr. Speaker, brought together the largest gathering of Bahamians ever for a cultural festival and destination event. It was an all-Bahamian production. Mr. Speaker, yes, we had some growing pains. The National Festival Commission worked through many growing pains in its first year. But its great success at the end of the day is delivering a world-class event enjoyed by thousands and thousands of Bahamians. We celebrate this event as a spectacular event in the backyard in grand style. For it is this sense of enjoyment and cultural celebration that underpins the entire spirit of Bahamian culture. The Speaker of the Royal Bahamas Police Force remarked on how proud they were because the carnival event was essentially policed not just by them, but also by the Bahamian people. He said everyone who participated in this event did so in the spirit of joy and pride, and they self-policed. The entire festival, Mr. Speaker, went without incident. The entire festival went without incident. Mr. Speaker, people came from many other countries and said that our carnival is way ahead of the curve. Many other destinations have taken 3 to 5 years to establish their event. Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival did it in grand style at the first shot. Credit goes to the team that worked tirelessly to pull this off. The Bahamian team at every level of production, from the commission to the secretariat to the external contractors. The event was led by an all-Bahamian cast, professionals in every field from marketing, events, hospitality, tourism, business, finance. The team comprised of people from various backgrounds, but they all put their best foot forward and delivered a fantastic product. Mr. Speaker, our carnival was set in an iconic venue. There is no question that this event was staged in the most iconic location of any carnival in the world. Nowhere else in the world does carnival take place on a white sand beach overlooking an iconic harbor with a beautiful lighthouse in the background. When the images get out to the world, that they see the energy, the color, the excitement, the location, everyone will flock to the Bahamas to experience what we got. Mr. Speaker, the government has made a significant investment this year because it was needed to build for the future. Initiatives of this scale require the type of commitment made by the Bahamian government. We are confident that on the basis of this success, corporate Bahamas and other major sponsors around the world will be clamoring to take their place. All of the economic data being compiled by the Commission will be presented in a report before the end of this month. Mr. Speaker, we got to thank the Grand Bahamians. In Grand Bahama, on the first weekend, we went to Grand Bahama for the kickoff event, and it was done in grand style. I think I got something underneath here for you all. That event took place on Tano Beach, April 18th, 2015, the Grand Bahama kickoff, and boy did they kick it off. It was led by Immerse Bahamas, a Bahamian company. They set the tone for the successful event. Grand Bahama turned out in massive numbers for a weekend of food, music, Junkanoo, and cultural celebration. The Music Masters Song Competition, Mr. Speaker, and semifinals were held at Tano Beach. Friday night elimination concert featured the great Jay Mitchell, while Saturday night we thought that we couldn't top that, and they came right back on Saturday night and featured T Connection, who absolutely brought the house down and tears to the eyes and hearts of many in Grand Bahama. The Commission, committed to bringing the benefits to the entire Bahamas, set the standard in Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, shortly after, we also popped into Exuma at the regatta and did a one-night show for them, and it shows the benefit could be spread to all festivals around the family of islands. I want the public to know that this is not a carnival commission. This is the Bahamas National Festival Commission. And in the years to come, and in the coming budget, we will outline the 25 or so festivals that we intend to encourage and produce. Mr. Speaker, the Cultural Village existed right down here on Arawaki and Long Wharf. A Junkanoo Village, rake and scrape stage, art pavilion, mega stage, stage Bahamia, beach central part. This was all the epicenter of cultural activity for the 3-day period. Vendors were challenged in some areas, and vendors were successful in some areas. Stage construction. It was interesting that on stage construction, we were engaged with world-class builders from the Bahamas. I want to outline the companies. The village was built and staged and produced with Unique Bahamas International, a Bahamian-owned company. Zaymar, a Bahamian company. Movi, a Bahamian company. And Prince William, a Bahamian producer. Never before, Mr. Speaker, have Bahamian artists performed on such a grand stage right at home. We also saw special guests like Marshall Montano, who said the mega stage even surprised him and has predicted that within 5 years, Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival will be the #1 festival in the region. We also saw some of the most popular entertainers in the Bahamas, including Ronnie Butler, Funky D, D-Mac, Stelit. This was at the Beachfront Pavilion on every single day. We have to thank Mr. Ian Poitier, who produced this opening ceremony. That's why I asked people, where were you? This fella produced an opening ceremony with the lighthouse just lit up, the sun setting in the west, and fire dancers on this iconic beach of Long Wharf. And right behind that, the fellas who we talk so bad about all the time, these jet ski operators, they put on a choreographed ocean show by jet ski. Where were you? Choreographed with the assistance of fire dancers, fire throwers, a fella blowing flames. Man, y'all from F&M, y'all should have been there. Where were you? On this iconic beach, on this beautiful evening, a first-class production, giant opening. Mr. Speaker, rake and scrape. This was not just about Junkanoo. Bahamian culture, I'm a Junkanoo. Bahamian culture is not just Junkanoo. We are far more diverse. We are bigger than that. And we're going beyond what we have ever done. We can do it now. So on that same stage, in that same area, Rake and Scrape was for the first time televised all around the world. First time, all around the world. This was the most popular event for families all day and all night. Ancient Man, Avi, the Falcons, everyone was out. Mr. Speaker, it is of important note. Lassie Doe and the boys, Bohog and the Rooters. You know? Yeah, Bohog was there. Ophi and the websites. They ain't know but these kind of people. He ain't know but them. They ain't know but them. Talking fool. The Caribbean, this is very important, Mr. Speaker. We also involved our brothers and sisters from around the Caribbean. We also involved them from around the Caribbean. Why? The Prime Minister, the member for Centerville, is the present chairman of CARICOM. The Prime Minister is the present chairman of CARICOM and head of a select committee about art and culture in the Caribbean. And the Festival Commission paid tribute to the Bahamas and our role in the region and our international partners this year by creating an inclusive, multilingual stage and festival where artists were also invited from countries such as Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, Cuba, and even Colombia. These artists also brought multiple press with them from the United States, Canada, and Europe, where similar festivals occur. Mr. Speaker, people got in a little twist about what this thing means, but it's really about music. It's telling the history of a country through art and music. Mr. Speaker, we had a song competition called Music Masters. Within this song competition, in a 4-week call period, 180 new Bahamian songs were produced. 180. This Music Masters concert set a very high bar for Bahamian artists, and it will serve as a platform to stimulate the production of new Bahamian music every year. Young artists will aspire to make it to the Music Masters stage, and seasoned artists will have to prove their standing in conquering the competition. That's the way this can go. The young ones come in, and the seasoned ones, you got to stand up and show up. I can't say the rest. Between the competition and the hundreds of musicians hired in the cultural village, this has been the largest single investment in Bahamian art, culture, and music ever. Ever. Not to mention, Mr. Speaker, we didn't go it alone. We had the global prestige and exposure of the artists and executives from Sony Music as a production partnership. The winners of the song competition in this year, Mr. Sammy Starr, who won $20,000 in the Music Masters competition, was Mr. Ian Poitier, who produced the largest prize for any music competition ever in the Bahamas, and all of the competitors are to be commended for their hard work, especially the second and third place winners, Lady E and Colin McDonald. But Mr. Speaker, Sony Music Production Partnership now. The Music Masters winners will have his hit song, Jump in the Line, recorded and produced by a renowned producer from Sony. Sony will design the cover and artwork for the single, coordinate a digital promotion day with key media partners all around the world, design and execute a comprehensive social media branding strategy for 1 year, which includes YouTube, Vivo, an artist channel, and online promotion for the next 12 months. Mr. Speaker, the participation, well, I know, in fact, next year, all y'all are going to be in the competition. We acknowledge that everyone would have loved to see more tourists participate in this event. We acknowledge that the many who did, the many who came in were from over the 50 countries involved. Some stayed, many stayed from the World Relays. But we also saw something very interesting, Mr. Speaker, that over 50 international media representatives who have all become advocates for the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, Carnival is about a diaspora getting together. And this may be one of the most important stories that we can tell as people of color, that we have been spread all around the globe. And these events bring people together. I tell you my most memorable picture from this event. I saw coming down Nassau Street where at last we got the thing out to the people, and tens of thousands of people lined Nassau Street to see tens of thousands of people in a parade. And they were jamming. Where were you? Down that parade route, you saw what I call the First Lady's Float. You had the Attorney General, you had the wife of the Prime Minister, you had the great Juanita Pacenti from Harbor Island, you had the President of the Senate, you had the wife of Mr. Philip Brave Davis, the Deputy Prime Minister, and it wasn't that this float was so beautiful. And the wife of the Minister for National Security, right? It wasn't that this was so beautiful. It was, the float was being pulled by guess who? I mean, the person driving the float. That's why I say this thing brings people together. The great Alfonso Elliott Boogaloo was driving the truck that pulled that float. Minutes you could drive Chrissy next time. No joke. That entire float, the float was driven by the best friend of the former Prime Minister, the man who got the F&M's first win. He was driving the float that carried the First Ladies. That's it. That's what this thing is all about. 2 days before, I don't know where they was. I keep asking, where were you? This will be my thing for the rest of the year. Don't worry about that.
Members.
He was there.
Members. Members.
We were there.
Members.
I'm just telling you, Mr. Speaker, I'm just letting you know, this brought people together from every aspect of life. It brought them together. No, he wouldn't come out.
This is, members, this minister's communication. Remember, you may continue.
This brought people together from every walk of life. It also did something special for Junkanoo, Mr. Speaker. For the Junkanooers, the Prime Minister and I attended a mass camp 2 days before the event. And he was even shocked to see the Valley Boys working together, the Saxons, Roots, One Family, Conquerors for Christ, Commandos, everyone working together as one. That is what this thing has produced. Mr. Speaker, tourism has given us some great figures here. The hotel guests were bused to the festival in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism, and the cruise ship passengers came by taxi. Some found their way by foot. It is of honorable mention that Mr. Maxwell Allen, who is one of the cab drivers over here at the port, Maxwell Adley, has written in a long missive stating his gratitude for the participation in and around this event. He states, on behalf of the small businessman, as he put it, the small man out on the dock, how much they benefited because we had activity of this kind going on in the Bahamas. They couldn't get more. Mr. Speaker, this year was an all-Bahamian achievement, which will have international visitors clamoring to be a part of it in the future. So those complaining about the numbers of international visitors that they couldn't get in, that and the other, we should be proud that we made the event a success all on our own, knowing that we laid the foundation to attract tourists in traditional and new markets. This does not diminish the fact that many, many people have already booked for next year. Mr. Speaker, the commitment we have to this is unmatched. The searches and exposure for Junkanoo was unmatched. The Ministry of Tourism independent marketing also saw that we achieved 73,000 clicks per day on the BJC website and Facebook. 2,500,000 likes on Facebook. 2,700,000 odd on Twitter. Millions and millions of people around the world tuned in to look at this event. Mr. Speaker, the Road Fever competition was really led by 29 new companies, real entrepreneurs. This year, we planted the seed knowing that this has enormous potential. The companies made significant investments of their own, as did the government, in providing seed funding. But those investments paid off in a big way as each company established itself and each company sold everything they produced. Everything they produced. In the years to come, Mr. Speaker, the event will prove itself to be a new market for those cultural entrepreneurs to generate high economic returns from a business point of view that only they can benefit from. The 29 companies weathered the storms that inevitably come with starting a new business. But with so many groups, it was a challenging year. However, the groups are to be congratulated for their efforts. And next year, all of them know that this is going to be bigger and better. Mr. Speaker, the success of the Road Fever is not measured in the number of people who just buy their costumes, not measured in the amount of people that come and look. It's not measured in what other people say who don't come. It's measured by the fact that Bahamians, over the hill, ordinary Bahamians, got to see themselves, their culture in full display and on parade. Nassau Street, once again, sir, was absolutely fantastic. You have never seen anything like it. Nothing we know right now can touch it. While many spectators lined the streets to watch, it is very, very important to note that most of them said that these groups were wonderful, and next year, as we say, they want to jump in the line. They don't want to get left behind. Mr. Speaker, last but not least, we also want to note that the National Commission is really grateful to the Junkanoo community that came on board and provided rush outs every day, every night at the village, close out the festivities. Many of the artisans benefited mightily. The Junkanoo Pavilion inside, where Bahamian bands and groups performed on a daily basis. Those activities were centralized and really maximized the exposure of this wonderful art form in the village. One of the signature events of this carnival, Mr. Speaker, was Junkamania, a performance of Junkanoo orchestras, and Colors Junkanoo Group took home the first prize. We've always been saying downtown it'd be interesting to how would you mix Junkanoo with other forms of music? Could you get an organ, a guitar? Can you light it up? Could we amplify it? Mr. Speaker, that happened in this village on Thursday night, and it was absolutely fantastic. This pavilion, Mr. Speaker, will grow and grow and grow into the future. Mr. Speaker, I want to let people know that this past weekend, you were witness to history. You were witness to history. In the years to come, 25 years from now, your grandchildren will ask you, Daddy, where were you when so-and-so happened? This was made in the Bahamas, for Bahamians, by Bahamians. And it made all of us proud to be Bahamian. Give him two things behind it. Mike, give him two bags, please. Mr. Speaker, I just have a quick presentation. You know, I'm as leader of oppositioners, I'm an equal opportunity fellow. So I wish this is a survival pack. You could keep this until next year. You know, I have one for you. I'm serious. We want to invite you on board. This is not a partisan thing. This is a national thing. So I have one for you, and I have one for the Prime Minister. And you all can share them. You can open them, whatever you want to do. But once you open it, you're in. Once you open it, you're in. All right? PM, that's yours. Yes, sir. And the leader of the opposition, that's yours. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The order that the communication be brought up. In order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to bring to your attention and to parliamentary colleagues and indeed the Bahamas at large the current state of the Freedom of Information Bill and regulations for public consultation and to begin the process of public dialogue. There's no question that the bill is a step in the right direction to add to the strengthening of our democracy. While many may argue that it has been too long given the nature of this bill, it is fitting that due diligence is given to ensure that the new and progressive legislation is properly instituted from the onset. There is no sense in rushing to pass a bill that will require immediate revision. Our aim is to have a very systematic implementation plan, and in order for that to happen, we must have certain things in place. While we know that there will be a learning curve, we aim to minimize any potential oversights, as this bill is of the utmost importance and has far-reaching implications. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to reinforce and to give effect certain fundamental principles underlying the system of constitutional democracy. This is governmental accountability, transparency, and public participation in national decision-making by granting to the public a general right of access to records held by the public authorities, subject to exemptions which balance that right against public interests in exempting from disclosure governmental, commercial, and personal information. The Freedom of Information Act, number 10 of 2012, was passed in January of 2012, but has not been brought into force as it came under attack from civil society as a number of classes of information which were exempt from disclosure relative to the Act. Taking into consideration the concerns raised by various members of civil society and the international organizations, an amendment to the Act would have been very extensive indeed. It was therefore decided to create a new bill. As a result, the Freedom of Information Act number 10 of 2012 will be repealed by the Freedom of Information Bill 2015. A committee which has held meetings over the past 10 months was therefore selected to examine the provisions of the existing Freedom of Information Act to determine whether or not it would recommend changes in accordance with other jurisdictions and international best practices. The committee included members of the Attorney General's Office, representatives from the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology, a representative from the College of the Bahamas from its law department, the Director of Archives, and the Data Protection Commissioner. The committee chose to benchmark the bill against several regional and Commonwealth countries, all which have approved Operational Freedom of Information Acts that have in some cases been evaluated for improved standards. Countries which were benchmarked include Jamaica, Trinidad, Cayman Islands, Bermuda, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Ireland. Additionally, the committee examined the Freedom of Information Act through the lens of two reports, namely the preliminary analysis of the Freedom of Information Bill, a report presented by the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative Group to the government of the Bahamas in May of 2012, which outlined a number of recommendations for the improvements to be made to the current Freedom of Information Act. And secondly, a report titled The Model Inter-American Law on Access to Public Information and its Implementation Guidelines. This report was prepared by the OAS, which documented international best practices for the Freedom of Information legislation. The review of reports of varied Freedom of Information legislations resulted in the following, but not limited, proposed changes. Firstly, expanding the right of access of information to bodies with nexus to the Bahamas. Secondly, expanding the class of accessible documents to include certain policy documents. Thirdly, narrowing the class of documents that are exempt from disclosure. And fourthly, recommendation for a standalone whistleblowing legislation and also for the review of the Official Secrecies Act. The government acknowledges that the access to information is a fundamental human right and an essential condition for all democratic societies. Consequently, the proposed bill seeks to minimize the number of exemptions when compared to other jurisdictions such as Bermuda and Canada. It seeks to strengthen the position of accountability as the document can serve as an anti-corruption tool, serves to strengthen democracy, and also to present a user-friendly document supporting participatory development, supporting also economic development, and help to reduce conflict. Mr. Speaker, I wish to end by stating that the Cabinet has approved that the draft bill be widely released for public consultation. It will be posted on the government website, the website of the website of the Office of the Attorney General, and the website of the Ministry of Education by the end of this week. The Office of the Attorney General will organize and host town hall meetings for public commentary. Anyone wishing to suggest changes for consideration can also write directly to the Attorney General and that office for the committee's consideration. I also want to highlight the fact that this piece of legislation is being patiently awaited and anticipated by journalists in the country. The committee, the Attorney General, and I have had the opportunity to meet with them, as we are well aware of how this will allow for deeper level of investigative reporting among those professionals. The committee has also consulted with the Cabinet, a representative of civil society, and presented the proposed changes. The feedback we received from all concerned groups has been factored into the document and is now ready for public review. I want to note, Mr. Speaker, that this bill is not considered a final document, but will be further reviewed relative to public commentary. We want the public to know that this proposed legislation will usher in a paradigm shift in our country, and this government is determined to bring this bill into effect in the shortest possible time after public consultation. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that we are making steps in the right direction, and we appreciate the concerns that were raised as it helped us to go back through this with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that what we present to the Bahamian people is a piece of legislation that will revolutionize the way we handle information moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the right honorable member for Centerville.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of government business of the House has had a brief communication with the leader of opposition business with respect to the House not pursuing to a debate today. I would wish to advise that we have been informed by the Minister of Tourism that the website of the Ministry of Tourism has been hacked, and it has enormous national security implications, and that it is a matter that the government, recognizing that it has happened elsewhere in the Caribbean with enormous national security implications, will in fact retire to discuss the matter, review it with respect to the implications to the reputation and any other matters that are connected thereto of the country. So I wanted to make that communication, sir.
Thank you, right honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, as we're not going to be coming back this afternoon, I move that we spend until next week, Wednesday, May 20th, at 10 a.m.
Second.
Thank you, honorable member. It's moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until Wednesday, the 20th of May, 2015. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until Wednesday, the 20th of May at 10 a.m.
All right.
Well, as the House now adjourns, we're hearing that from the Prime Minister that the Ministry of Tourism website has been hacked, and there may be some national security implications along with that, so that is going to be dealt with right away. The Education Minister, Jerome Fitzgerald, saying that the Freedom of Information Bill's draft will be posted on government websites by the end of this week. They want wide consultation for it. This, of course, will not be the final bill, but they're looking for some public consultation so that they can get input on it to get the final bill out. Also out of the House today, the Youth, Sports, Culture Minister talking about the IAAF and Junkanoo Carnival. Accolades going to the Nurses Association on their 52nd anniversary. The Deputy Prime Minister speaking about Power Secure. The Prime Minister talking about his communication in his intervention in Martinique on the CARICOM France Summit regarding climate change. Several school students from Anatole Rogers given praises for winning an international tourism management competition. And also the Speaker of the House saying that he wants all reports regarding the urban renewal ordered to be tabled tabled in Parliament before the Public Accounts Committee can go any further with it. But for more details of all of those things that happened this morning in the House of Assembly, we send it to the House where Janaea Noel Ferguson is standing by, I believe, with. She's not ready yet? Okay. But we understand that Janaea will be there with the Honorable Ken Dorset, who is the Minister of Environment and Housing, and also the Southern Shores MP. And from the opposition, the Honorable Hubert Chipman, who is the MP for St. Anne's and head of the Public Accounts Committee. I'm sure she will question him about the Speaker's new instructions there. Anyway, we understand that Janaea Noel Ferguson is ready now, so we're going to send it straight to the House and hear what she has to say.
Coming out of the House of Assembly this morning, we just heard from Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie that the tourism website has been hacked. Of course, he's headed into meetings now to discuss the national security implications of that hacking and what is expected to come out of it. But we also heard a number of other communications coming out. We heard from the Minister of Education, Jerome Fitzgerald, giving us an update on the Freedom of Information Act. Now, a number of public meetings are expected to take place for there to be public consultation on that bill. But today we had anticipated to begin debate on the Petroleum bill and the Sovereign Welfare Fund bill. And I'm joined by the Minister of the Environment, Ken Dorset. You had anticipated to begin debate on that bill today. We spoke with some officials from Bahamas Petroleum who gave their support to the bill. Now, can you tell us this morning what you're anticipating with the passage of this bill?
Well, certainly what we're anticipating with the eventual debate and passage of the bill is a totally new regime for the Bahamas with respect to oil exploration. We are going to be introducing a new fiscal regime, which means that the Bahamas will certainly be able to derive more revenue from the exercise than we have done in the past. But more importantly, we'll be advancing new environmental and pollution regulations and also health and safety regulations to ensure that our legislative regime is certainly not only up to par, but will be a trendsetter in terms of international standards and best practices. And so that's what you'll be seeing when we get a chance to debate the bill. But today in the House, there were a lot of announcements that were made. The Prime Minister was able to speak to his meeting with the French President when we traveled to Martinique for the Climate Change Caribbean Summit. He was able to highlight the discussions that he had with the French President, who is very much interested in re-engaging the Caribbean and assisting us with our renewable energy efforts. You would have heard the Prime Minister speak to his intervention with the President, where he asked him to focus specifically on storage technology for the Bahamas. Because unlike the countries in the Lesser Antilles that rely on geothermal, we don't have that capacity. And so we obviously have a lot of solar radiation days in any calendar year, and we want to make sure that we have the storage capacity so that solar could move from an intermittent energy source to a base load power. And so that was one of the discussions that the PM had with the French President, together with obviously what needs to be done in the ramp up to the Conference of the Parties that will be held in Paris in December.
Okay, now we also heard this morning when we talk about energy reform, the restructuring that's expected to take place at BEC. Any comments toward that? You talked about solar power being utilized, and as we look at BEC now, what does this mean?
Well, I certainly think that there are two pillars of the energy sector reform that are currently being advanced. The Deputy Prime Minister would have spoken obviously to the narrowing down to a final and preferred bidder in the BEC energy reform process. That bidder that has been selected also has vast experience in renewable energy. In addition to that, they have a lot of experience in dealing with dispatchable power on a modular scale, which bodes well for our template in the Family Islands. And so we moved to final negotiations with them. Hopefully we will be able to come up with a deal that will inure to the benefit of the people of the Bahamas. And the second leg of that whole process that is also being advanced is the fact that we have now begun the residential energy self-generation program. And so we have passed the amendments to the electricity bill, and those who now have solar and or wind generating facilities are required by law to register with the Bahamas Electricity Corporation and the Ministry of Works and Urban Development. So truly exciting times in terms of advancing our renewable energy future.
Okay. Thank you so much. You heard it from the Minister of the Environment, Kendra Dorset. I'm also joined by the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, Hubert Chipman. We also heard from the Speaker this morning that he's now asking the Public Accounts Committee to stay its hand in relation to further inquiries into urban renewal, and I'm going to get a response this morning now from the Public Accounts Committee Chair, Hubert Chipman.
Well, to be honest with you, I met with the Speaker this morning, somewhat shocked on the decision. The decision was made by the Crown, I am told, by him. which I don't agree with, and I told him also at that particular time I would be seeking legal advice, but I have that a choice to do. Where do we go from here? Based on what I've heard from the ruling, what the Speaker read in the House of Assembly this morning, you really don't need even to have a Public Accounts Committee. If everything has to go before the floor of the House and before it gets to the Public Accounts Committee, what is the purpose of the Public Accounts Committee? We should be able to send for paper, people, and documents. What I'm hearing that everything has to go through the House of Assembly. If I am the government, would you think I would send for persons' papers if I am considered doing something wrong? No, everything has to be debated in the House through a resolution. It don't make any sense.
Have you done your research and the lead up to this? Any other examples where this problem may have come up?
Well, there is. I understand there was. The Speaker cited something that happened in Bermuda, where very similar to this, where the House had voted and everything else, and then at the end of the day they withdrew it because it wasn't laid on the floor of the House. When I read Section 14 at the time, and I talked to some people, I thought I was in the realm of the law as far as requesting an audit. I did request the audit. The Auditor General at that particular time said that he was going to do an audit of urban renewal anyhow at the beginning of the year. I cannot see what the Public Accounts Committee did wrong, if anything.
So now you're saying you're seeking legal advice and you're really shocked by what was said today?
Absolutely shocked.
All right, thank you so much. You heard it from the Public Accounts Committee Chair, Hubert Chipman, stating his displeasure with the ruling handed down by the Speaker today. He has asked that the Public Accounts Committee stay its hand in relation to further inquiries into the report on the Urban Renewal Commission. We'll, of course, continue to bring you all of those details, but there will be no House of Assembly session this afternoon. In fact, the House of Assembly now resumes on May 20th. That's next week, Wednesday at 10 a.m. You'll, of course, continue to watch Channel 40 at that time for all of the updates and live interviews from the House of Assembly. I'm Janaea Noel Ferguson. Back to you in the studio, Julian.
Yes, Janaea, and we'll see how all those developments that happened today move along. And that's it. That's our broadcast. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on the 20th of May.
Thank you.